Good. Everyone ready?
Introduce.
I will, yeah, okay. I'm going to do the roll call, please.
Great, thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the March 4th, 2024 Planning Commission meeting. Mr. Baggins, may I please have the roll call?
McGee, Hauser,
Here?
Bixson,
Here.
Bachman,
Here.
Klauser,
Here.
Gasson,
Here.
Kenjuk,
Yes.
Lloyd,
Here.
Stone.
Okay, thank you. Would you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Again, good evening, everyone. My name is Christian Hauser. I'm the vice chair. I'm going to run the meeting today while Mr. McGee is not here. But for members of the public and for people watching at home, you may notice a couple new people up here, and I'd like to take an opportunity to introduce them. To my left, to your right, is Jessica Klauser, and then over here is Mr. Dan Bachman. Sarah King, who was on Planning Commission, as you may or may not know, is now a member of City Council. She's filling the vacancy that was left by, remind me, Mr. Gould. Doug Gould, and she will be on City Council through November of 2025. As a result of that, there's a vacancy left here, and that was filled by Ms. Klauser, I believe. And then when I was appointed this, or when I was elected to City Council, my spot came open, and that, I believe, is filled by Mr. Bachman. So we have a full 9-member planning commission, although there's one person gone tonight, okay? But that being said, Ms. Klauser, do you want to take a moment to introduce yourself to the public, to your colleagues? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Jessica Klauser. I live on Ludlow with my husband and 2 young little ones. I work at Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan. I oversee strategy and development for our Medicare business. Before working in strategy at Blue Cross, I worked in the Government Affairs Department where I analyzed public policy and how it impacted healthcare. I have a master's in public policy from the University of Michigan, and I have a dual bachelor's degree in business administration and marketing and promotions from Northwood University. I grew up in northern rural Michigan in a small touristy town called Oscoda. And I am president of the Longmeadow Elementary PTA. So that's a little bit about me. And I am excited to be here. I think this is a really unique opportunity to actively participate in shaping the future of our community for generations to come. So I'm excited to be on the Planning Commission and work alongside all of you and with the city staff and the public too.
Thank you. Mr. Bachman, please.
Yes, thank you very much. Dan Bachman, good evening. I'm honored as to be part of this esteemed board, and I'd like to thank Mayor Bixson for his confidence in me and the appointment to this position, and extend that gratitude to City Council for its support as well. Just a bit of background on me professionally, and then the roles I play in my community and in service. I've been self-employed almost entirely my entire adult life. I practice financial planning, which I've done for the past 19 years. The past 14 of which as a certified financial planner practitioner, which requires a fiduciary standard of care, a mindset that I think will be beneficial to this role in serving our community. My secondary business is a consultation to an Office of Supervisory Jurisdiction, where 2 other registered principals and I supervise 222 financial advisors across 5 states. And safeguard the approximately $16 billion in assets those advisors manage. Service to my community varies. I serve in different ways to our local parishes, the family of parishes, but most extensively my service is through the Stony Point Homeowners Association. So I'm from the east side. If you're not familiar with Stony Point, I live on Creekview Drive. For the past 4 years, I've served as a director of the Stony Point Homeowners Association, and the board of directors has saw fit to elect me to serve as its president the past 3 years. And briefly, some of my responsibilities include steering 7 committees, 2 of which I chair, architecture and legal, and those have significant parallels to the work of the Planning Commission, albeit a substantially larger scope. what we'll be dealing with here. So with that experience, I hope to serve our community well in this role. And like Jessica, I have two little ones at home, very young, and my wife was gracious enough to excuse me from the very elaborate bedtime routine this evening. So we'll see what chores she has in mind for me when I get home in exchange. So thank you very much for welcoming me.
Daniel, thank you, and Jessica, thank you very much for your service, and I think both of you will find that this is, it's hard work, but it's very, very rewarding, and you've got a lot of people here who are always willing to help you, city administration as well, so if there's ever an issue, you have a question or comment, please don't hesitate to reach out, okay? With that being said, we will move on to agenda item number 3, which is the public comment. So anyone who has or would like to make a public comment on an issue that's not up on the agenda, please step up to the lectern. If not, if you would rather wait until later to address an issue that you see on the agenda, that's perfectly fine. No one being said, who's running the, Rose, is there anyone online who would like to make a public comment at this time?
No one with their hand raised.
Okay. All right, with that being said, we will move on. I don't see anyone, so we'll reserve public comment for later on in the meeting. We'll go to line item number 4, which is the approval of the minutes. Line item number 4A, consideration of the minutes of the regular meeting of December 4th, 2023.
So moved.
Okay, is there support?
Support.
Okay, discussion. Okay, roll call, please. Oh, I'm sorry. Go
Sorry,
ahead.
Mr. Vice Chairman. Could I request just a brief clarification on item 6B?
This is on the December 4th, 2023 minutes?
That's correct.
Yes, go right ahead, of course.
So, of course, I was not a commissioner at the time, but I took the time to review the meeting in its full duration. There's an item regarding Mr. LaChurco's comments to a question you asked about the timing of construction.
Okay.
And the way the minutes read, it would seem to indicate that construction would be delayed 18 months following the permits being received. And I don't think that was the essence of his answer. I think it was just strictly duration.
Okay. So, Mr. Banda, city manager, or Mr. Peckins, how does that work? That if there's a question about the accuracy of the record, do you go back and double check or verify? Do we go back to the recording? How does that work?
Maybe easier, if you will. Chairman, tonight, ask Mr. LaChurch, I know he's here, just
Okay.
on that one item, and then we could clarify it right now.
Okay, does that work for everyone, Mr. Bachman?
Yes.
Okay, so let's do that. So I guess the question, should we hold off?
We can ask him right now. if
Okay,
you wouldn't mind.
Mr. LaChurco, do you mind coming up to the lectern? Sorry, my glasses. Good evening, how you doing?
Good. Joe
Good.
Lochurko, 1519 Ponside Court. To answer the question, 18 months would be starting the process, not getting the permit. So like for the preserves, we got to go to the DEQ. You're building alongside the river, so there's a lot of permit and time that's going to be gone. But once you have the permit, then however long it would take to get a building permit, so, but 18 months would be from approval to start.
Does that clarify your concern in the minutes?
I just want to make sure the minutes accurately reflect that.
Okay, so to that extent, Mr. Bando or Mr. Peckins, you'll make the correction in the Scrivener notes? Okay, all right. Thank you, Mr. LaChurco, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. So I guess for procedural process, do we just hold that in abeyance and then, or?
We can do subject to that
Okay,
correction.
okay, so subject to that clarification in the meeting minutes, is there a motion to approve the minutes of December 4th, 2023?
I think we had that.
You had that already? Okay, so then we'll just take the vote then. Okay, Mr. Peckins, would you mind the vote, please?
Hauser,
Yes.
Vixen,
Yes.
Bachman,
Yes.
Clauser,
Yes.
Gasson,
Yes.
Kenjuk,
Yes.
Lloyd.
Yes.
Okay, line item 4B, consideration of the minutes of the regular meeting of February 5th, 2024. Mr. Kenzik?
Yes, actually, I think there's a contradiction in the minutes. Under 1, it says the quorum was present, and then down below under 4A, it says there was not a quorum.
Right,
Rose can adjust that. There was not a quorum.
correct. That was the last meeting in February, correct. Okay, so subject to that clarification, is there a motion?
So moved.
Okay, support?
Support.
Okay, discussion? Roll call, please, Mr. Peckins.
Hauser,
Yes.
Vixen,
Yes.
Bachman,
Yes.
Clauser,
Yes.
Gasson,
Yes.
Kenjuk,
Yes.
Lloyd.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so line item number 5, there are no public hearings tonight on the agenda. Is that correct, Mr. Banda? Okay, so we'll move to line item number 6, considerations. We'll start with letter 6A, or number 6A. Consideration of the preserves at 100 Diversion Street, 110 and 100 South Street, special project and site plan review approval. Mr. Banda or Vidya?
Yep, I'm gonna turn over to Vidya. We, for those new members, we had met with both new members, kind of had a planning commission 101, brought everybody up to speed. For anybody watching, we conducted public hearings at that meeting, although we could not take action because we did not have a quorum. And we talked to the developer, Vidya, and we'll do a brief overview again of the same projects tonight. Again, not a public hearing, but we always take comments if necessary. And then looking for a motion tonight, if it's approved, to recommend to city council for special project and site plan approval. This is both for items 6A and 6B.
B, correct.
So Vidya will, I'll give you, I think, a condensed version a little bit of what we saw last month.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Banda. Members of the commission, the proposal before you tonight is from Mr. Lachurko, and the proposal is for a multiple family residential unit on a 5.05 acre site on the west side of Diversion Street, just south of First Street. I'm sharing the site plan on the screen. The site is zoned I2, which is the Industrial 2 district, and it is commonly known as the Van Horn Trucking Facility. Now, residential uses are not permitted in the I2 district. However, the site is located within the special projects umbrella, which means that the applicant can request approval of a use provided they can demonstrate a greater public need being secured by the proposed use than otherwise the way the property would be used under its current underlying zoning. Per the master plan that was adopted by the city in April of 2022, this site is designated as multiple family and mixed residential. So the proposed use is in line with what is recommended in the master plan. As Mr. Banda mentioned, we already had a public hearing for this project at the February meeting. However, an action could not be taken. I'll summarize the details of the project in brief. The proposal involves the construction of 2 buildings with 36 units in each building. The parcel includes 3 separate parcels of land, 3 separate tax ID numbers. As part of the proposal, the applicant will be combining all 3 into a single tax parcel ID. Although zoned I2, the applicant has done their best to design the site to comply with the RM2, which is in alignment with the master plan district's setback requirements for this district. With regard to vehicle access, there is a single access drive that comes off Diversion that provides circulation around the entire site. All of the drive aisles are 24 feet wide, which is important for 2-way circulation of movement. Traffic has always been an issue of concern on Diversion Street, so the applicant was required to perform a detailed traffic impact study, which was conducted by Fleece and Vanderbrink. Typically, a traffic impact study evaluates all intersections on a scale from A through F. Level A means best functioning, level F means the intersection fails. The alphabets ranging from A through F indicate the delay number of seconds at each intersection. So based upon the traffic study, per the traffic patterns to and from the site, the Rochester Road and Diversion Street intersection westbound approach, which is the main approach of concern, it currently functions at a level of service E, and after this project, it shall continue to function at a level of service E, although the seconds delay will be slightly more. Based on the traffic engineer's review of this proposal, the only way to address this would likely be to change the signal timing on Rochester Road. However, when you change the signal timing at one intersection, it does result in having a domino effect on all the intersections down on Main Street and down south on Rochester Road. As a result of which, it is also under MDOT jurisdiction. That is not something they advise, or that is not something that is being recommended at this time. So the traffic impact study concludes that the existing roadway network at this time is sufficient to accommodate the traffic generated by this use, and no improvements are recommended to any of the roadways. The city staff also made a note at previous meetings that the site was formerly used as a cement plant, and it had trucks moving in and out of it all day long. When compared to the use of the site as an industrial facility, the proposed intensity of traffic being generated by the use on this site is considered as being of a lesser intensity. As regards to pedestrian access, the applicant will be installing a new 5-foot wide sidewalk along the site's Diversion Street frontage. And there is also going to be a 6-foot wide crushed gravel river walk along the entire frontage of the Clinton River on the north side of the property. This crushed gravel drive, it also winds up into a loop and then turns into an access trail that comes on the south side of the site and connects back into Diversion. This portion of the loop, however, is located within a future cross-access easement that provides access to the parcel that is to the west of the cement batch plant site. At such time, should that parcel be developed, then this trail will be relocated elsewhere or shifted so that it does not impede access to that parcel. With regard to parking, based upon the ordinance standards of parking required for 1- and 2-bedroom apartments, the site requires a total of 132 parking spaces. Plan notes a total of 134 parking spaces, 50 of which are on the interior. So the lower level of both these buildings is a parking level. So the parking lot, as you can see on the site plan, the spaces are shown striped. This is the lowermost level of the building. Access to the lower level can be accomplished by moving in this way and back out the same way. Similarly, for this building to the south, access is in and out. There is adequate turn movement within the parking level of both buildings. There is also accommodation for internal bike parking and motorcycle parking on the lower levels. In addition to that, the applicant does show one ride-share pickup parking space in front of each building, since these are apartment buildings. With regard to architecture, which is one of the key points of discussion on the site, I shall scroll to the sheet that has got the architectural elevations. If you'll give me 1 second, I shall minimize the size of the elevation so it fits on the sheet, on the screen before you. So the applicant has appeared before the Planning Commission multiple times, and each time there have been revisions made to the architecture to come to this point where the building is predominantly being constructed of brick, and the additional material is composite siding. At the last public hearing and the meeting before that, the preliminary hearing, the applicant had presented a 3D rendering and a 3D simulation of the entire site and the neighboring development, Tooten Diversion, to show how the buildings would appear. The color palette of these buildings is consistent. It's in terms of earth tone, brown and black. I will defer to the applicant. I'm sure they will show the 3D rendering and the 3D imagery on screen before the Planning Commission. With regard to landscaping, there is a detailed landscape plan that has been submitted with this proposal. I will scroll to the landscape plan sheet. The plan proposes significant landscaping along the site's Clinton River Trail frontage. There is also landscaping proposed around the south side and within the parking lot islands as is required by the zoning ordinance. All of the plantings meet the minimum requirements of the ordinance. We had noted that all of the landscaping that is installed must be provided with irrigation, and I believe it is the applicant's intention to do so. One of the things to note as part of the landscaping are extensive retaining wall systems. Since the site is abutting the Clinton River, there is a grade change, as a result of which this proposal includes a retaining wall section on the north side, and there is additional retaining walls over here, and there is a boulder wall that is shown along and around the detention pond that is at the west end of the site. Now, the detention pond has got a boulder wall, and we had previously expressed concerns whether a fence needs to be installed around the entire periphery of the detention pond. However, the fence is shown only along the east end of the detention pond, and the applicant has clarified that based on any safety concerns, the fence is all that is required, and the remaining portion of the pond it has been designed to meet engineering safety concerns. With regard to tree removal, per our ordinance, the applicant is required to provide a detailed tree survey. The site has a total of 82 regulated trees, of which 40 trees are to be removed and 40 trees are to be preserved. The applicant is proposing a significant amount of tree replacement that will meet the ordinance standards for replacement of every regulated tree that is removed from the site. There was a slight mistype in the calculation numbers, which I believe is a typographical error. So it was our recommendation that the applicant just make that correction. There is a detailed lighting plan, lighting and illumination plan for the site, which includes wall-mounted fixtures, pole lights, and decorative lighting on bollards along the Clinton River itself. All of the fixtures meet the ordinance requirements for shielding. With regard to trash removal, that was a concern of ours since no trash enclosure was shown on the exterior. The areas that you see on the building's interior, these areas are trash collecting facilities. They're located on the lower level of the building. I will defer to the applicant so they can explain to you exactly how trash hauling works from these sites and how the residents of the building get rid of the trash within the building itself and how it is removed from the site. With regard to signage, the plan proposes a single monument sign along the site's Diversion Street frontage. The design of the proposed sign was a little rustic. We had previously recommended that the applicant submit a monument sign with a design that is more in keeping with the building architecture, whereas the sign that was proposed was more industrial. It had cages, which are typically used, gabion cages. Those are typically used in the detention pond fourways. So the applicant's design was consistent with a more modern industrial approach. We had suggested that it be more in keeping with the actual architecture of the buildings. And I believe the applicant does have a revised monument sign design to present before the Planning Commission today. One of the questions that was raised previously at the Planning Commission discussions was the location of rooftop equipment on the building. Because the site sits so much lower than Rochester Road, the Planning Commission expressed concern whether driving on the bridge will give a view of any mechanical equipment that is located on the rooftop. I will defer to the applicant to provide clarification in that regard at this time. In addition to the detailed site plan review that has been done, as a special project, the applicant is required to go through something called a sustainability evaluation analysis. A sustainability evaluation basically includes 20 indicator points. Some of the indicators score 1 point, whereas others are worth 0.5, and some are worth as much as 2 points. For a project to be deemed sustainable, the project has to score anywhere from 15 points or above on a 20-point scale. Based upon our review of this project, we believe the project scored a total of 14.5 points out of 20. This project does meet all of the standards for environmental health, mobility, and fiscal strength, and also most of the points for public services. Although the site impacts the DDA, it is strictly a residential use, so the applicant cannot score any points for creation of a commercial business, which also gets points under our scoring or indicator system. The sustainability evaluation is intended to provide the Planning Commission and the City Council a guideline and a benchmark for reviewing projects, so the same standards are applied to all special projects and new projects. We believe, although this project scored 14.5 out of 20, at this point of time, the applicant has elevated the design of the project to the extent for the maximum points they could possibly score. When this project is viewed in conjunction with 210 Diversion, which is also a project being proposed by the applicant immediately to the southeast of the preserves, we believe together both the projects create a more cohesive site and improve the pedestrian and walkability within the downtown itself. At this time, based on our review of the proposal, We believe the applicant is definitely contributing to a public benefit to the city at large by using up and cleaning up a brownfield and redeveloping it as a modern residential apartment complex with amenities along the Clinton River. The applicant has been before the Planning Commission on multiple occasions and has been responsive to the numerous concerns that were raised and has made design changes accordingly. At this time, it is our recommendation that the Planning Commission recommend to City Council approval of special projects consideration for the preserves, subject to the 7 conditions that are listed in the McKenna review letter dated January 16th of 2024. I would be happy to answer any questions. Since the applicant, if the Planning Commission would give me 1 second, I have to figure out how to stop share on this project. Since the applicant is proposing the preserves and 210 diversion as a single project, even though they are technically 2 separate projects, would the Planning Commission like me to present 210 diversions review also, so that when the applicant responds, their response basically ties the 2 projects together? I would be happy to handle them separately, or should the Planning Commission choose to, I can do them back to back.
It probably makes sense
Thank
to
you.
us to do them all at once, so Vidya can go through it, but any objection to that? Okay, Vidya, if you don't mind, why don't you just do 210 as well? And then once we're done, we'll have questions for you possibly, and then we can have the applicant come up to the lectern. Thank you.
Sounds good. Thank you, Chairman
You're
Hauser.
welcome. You're welcome.
I'll now review the proposal for 210 diversion. I'm going to share the site plan for 210 diversion on my screen now. Now, 210 diversion is located immediately to the southeast of the preserves. The project that I just reviewed is located over here on your screen, and this is a much smaller site. It is the proposal for 210 diversion is to build a 4-story, 21-unit multiple family residential building. The site is unusual in that it is split zoned into 2 zoning districts. A portion of it is zoned O2, which is restricted office, and the other portion is zoned I2, which is industrial 2. Now, residential uses are not permitted in the I2, and the O2 permits only upper story apartments as a special exception use, not to be confused with a special project. Due to the nature of the site, due to its split zone status and the fact that it is being developed along with the preserves, the applicant is seeking special projects consideration for 210 diversion also. As in the case of the preserves, this site too is master planned as multiple family mixed residential and has been designed by the applicant to keep true to the master plan designation rather than the existing I2 or O2 designations. The use, as I mentioned, is once again a multiple family residential development building. As a result of the split zone status, it is difficult to apply any specific setback requirement for the parcel itself. If you look at the subject site, it includes a rectangular parcel and it's got another rectangular parcel to its south. The southern portion that my cursor is on is actually located within the city of Rochester Hills. Although for acreage purposes, it is part of 210 diversions development, this parcel is essentially to remain untouched. All of the trees within it, and this parcel essentially serves as the open space component for 210 diversion. This parcel has got steep grade change in it and also is significantly wooded, so the applicant is going to leave it as is. As a result of which, the main parcel that you see over here has got the main building located almost up till the west property line, and a detached garage building located along the east property line. With regard to vehicle access, there is a single access drive that you can see off the curve of diversion that provides access in and out of the site. The main entrance drive is labeled as 23.9 feet. The minimum required width for a 2-way drive is 24 feet. It requires a marginal adjustment of a few inches, which I believe the applicant can easily make. The traffic study that I previously referenced by Fleece and Vanderbrink is very much applicable to this building too. This development with only 21 multiple family units contributes a lot less traffic to the abutting streets when compared with the preserves. As in the case of preserves, it is going to add additional traffic to the streets, but it is not going to significantly alter the existing level of service in the nearby intersections. While the intersection at Rochester and Diversion does not function at the best when you see it from a range of A through F, any changes made to signal timing will only result in creating a domino effect for challenges up and down Rochester Road, as a result of which the traffic study is recommending no further changes along the frontage of this property either. With regard to parking, based upon the ordinance requirements, a total of 36 parking spaces are required. Plan notes a total of 37 parking spaces, out of which 8 are located on the interior of the building at the lower level. What is interesting to note is the lower level of this building also includes some basement level studio units. So it has got lower level parking only along this portion. The remaining parking for the site is on the surface or within the garage buildings over here. With regard to architecture, applicant has, I will pull up the renderings which show a better impression of what 210 Diversion is going to look like. This is the main residential building that you see over here. Diversion Street is located up here. So the entrance to the site, providing access to the lower level parking, is located here. On the bottom right, you can see this is the entrance to the site of Diversion, and this is the detached garage building. The proposed building materials and colors are compatible with what has been proposed for the preserves itself, and a better presentation will be when the applicant presents their 3D rendering for this project. With regard to landscaping, since the site is significantly occupied by buildings, there isn't much room for landscaping on the site itself. The landscaping that you see along the site's frontage on Diversion is technically located within Diversion Street right of way. If I go back to the site plan, if you see the site plan over here, I shall zoom in a little bit. The trees that you saw on the rendering are located in this area. This is a very unusually shaped property boundary lines. The right-of-way line comes this way, and then it jogs down into a sharp angle and then straightens itself out. Typically, a right-of-way line should have followed the curve of the road, but for some reason, at the time the property lines were established, this unusual triangular piece got taken in as part of the right-of-way. As a result of which, any trees that are being installed over here are located within Diversion Street right-of-way and require approval from the DPW department and from City Council also. The plan also proposes a full hedgerow of evergreens along the entire west property line. However, since the building is located at the property line, the applicant is obtaining a 5-foot wide permanent landscape easement from the preserves in order to enable the installation of the landscaping hedge along this portion of the site. This permanent easement will be recorded with the site itself, so it will remain in perpetuity, and at no point of time can the landscape easement be taken away from the site. With regard to tree removal, the site has got only a few regulated trees. A lot of the trees that are located on it are not desirable species. The applicant is proposing to replace some of the trees and is also going to be paying into the township's tree fund for the replacement trees that cannot be accommodated on the site. The south parcel that I previously mentioned, as you can see, all of these are existing tree cover. None of those trees are proposed to be removed, and all of those trees are proposed to remain as it is. As in the case of the preserves, there are different forms of illumination proposed for the site, including light fixtures in the balconies and along on the walls of the garage building and under the front awning and canopies of the building itself. All of the fixtures and the photometric plan meets ordinance standards. When you saw the rendering, the applicant is proposing a signage for the building, which will be mounted on the building itself. I believe since my review letter was done, the applicant has slightly refined the design, which I'm sure they will present before you tonight. One concern on this building that the Planning Commission had expressed was to show where all the utility leads, such as the gas lines and mains, come into the building. On one previous project that had been approved by the Planning Commission, it was realized after the fact that many of these utility conduits were mounted right on the exterior wall of the building, really impacting the appearance of the building. So the Planning Commission had asked the applicant to show where the gas lines and leads are going to come into the building and to ensure that they are placed in a manner that is not visible from the public rights of way or impact the way the site looks as a whole. At this time, I do not have that information. I'm not sure if the applicant can provide an update before you this evening with regard to any additional information they may have in that regard. As in the case of the preserves, this project too is required to go through the sustainability evaluation and analysis with 20 indicator points. Our evaluation of this proposal actually resulted in the project scoring a total of 12.5 points. The reason for this is a multitude of reasons. While the site individually does not include required parkland or trees, as a result of which they did not score the required indicator points for environmental qualities, the site is contiguous to the preserves to the west, and certain development features between both of these projects overlap. The preserves provides for additional trees. In fact, the amount of trees that are being planted on the preserves is greater than what is required for the project. The applicant is planting it on the preserves closer to the property line of the diversion in order to make up for the fact that there is not enough room on this site in order to plant those trees. Although impacting the DDA, once again, this is strictly a residential use with no commercial component. There is no mixed use, so they cannot score any of the points that relate to the downtown or mixed use portion of the site. One of the biggest challenges in indicator points for both 210 diversion and the preserves was housing affordability. Now, the baseline data in our sustainability evaluation analysis, when the study was originally done, had a certain dollar value assigned to what was considered as being sustainable or what was considered as being an affordable unit. However, we have not had a single project that has actually been able to hit that affordable threshold. Since the pandemic, the cost of building materials and the cost of development has significantly gone up. We are aware of that. As a result of which, the number that actually reflects our baseline data does need to be revisited and adjusted. When the City Council adopted the original sustainability worksheet and then its updated worksheet version in 2021, it was with the understanding that the worksheet would be revisited as and when needed in order to make adjustments to keep up with what the current development trends are. So it would be a recommendation that in the future, the Planning Commission and the City Council take a look at the housing affordability and the housing mix portion of the sustainability evaluation worksheet in order to adjust the baseline data, because what we currently have would be unrealistic in the current development scenario. Based upon our review of this proposal, once again, it is our recommendation that the Planning Commission recommend to the City Council special projects approval for 210 diversion, subject to the 7 conditions that are listed in the McKenna review letter dated January 15th of 2024. I'm sorry, both of these reviews were rather long-winded, so I'm happy to answer any questions for you now or after the applicant has made their presentation. I would be happy to provide you with any answers. Thank you.
Vidya, thank you. Commissioners, any questions for Vidya concerning either the preserves or a 210 diversion project? Or if you don't have any now, if you'd rather wait till after the presentation by the applicant, that's perfectly fine too. I just want to make it available if you have a question for Vidya now. Mr. Lord.
Just a quick one. On the preserves, is the only deviation that they would be asking for under RM2 zoning, is it just the front setback is the only deviation?
Since our master plan district we have not yet adopted all of those, I did not evaluate this project to see just how far off from an RM2 district in terms of how many standards it might be deviated from exactly. But I do know that the applicant, when they were designing the site, tried to keep as much in line with the RM2 district standards as was feasible. Maybe Mr. Epping or Mr. LaChurco could specify exactly if there is more than just the front setback that they're marginally off.
Mr. Gasson, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A question for Vidya, and I may have more
Yes.
later, but on the 210 diversion, you mentioned the property line is zero line on the west with the building edge, and on the east with the garages. On the east, you mentioned, or the west, you mentioned landscape maintenance. Is there also some sort of building maintenance that would be required for both east and west, and also the north?
Yes, so I will pull up the plan for 210 diversion. I'll pull up the site plan on the screen so it would be easier to point out. So along the west property line, if you see Mr. Gasson, the building is located at 0.1. That's the setback. So it's pretty much on the property line. There is a permanent 5-foot wide easement for the site for basement patio at grade wall and landscape easement. This will also be necessary for maintenance. During the process of construction, the applicant, this red line demarcates the limits of construction, easement, and grading. So during the time of construction, the easement granted is a lot greater, but after it is done, the landscape maintenance covers only this 5-foot wide strip, which has got the hedge. In terms of the east side of the property, the building is located at a setback of 1 feet. I believe the property to the east is owned by MDOT. I believe that's what the applicant stated at the last meeting, and it's my understanding. So I will have the applicant clarify if they would be seeking a maintenance easement or access for maintenance purposes on the east wall of the building. You questioned one more facade. Which facade did you have concerns about?
The north is also on the property line.
Yes, yes. The north property, they will need access. They're already planting landscaping within the city's right-of-way. So when the city council approves the installation of the landscaping, maintenance of the landscaping will also, an easement for maintenance of the landscaping will also have to be granted, at which time the building maintenance can be tied into it, because they will essentially be maintaining the landscaping within the right-of-way area.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Vidya, do we know how the Rochester Hills parcel is zoned? Is that industrial?
I believe, please correct me if I'm wrong, I believe it is zoned residential. However, it is not a buildable parcel. It does not meet the minimum dimensions for any kind of development that would be allowed under their zoning, nor is the grading or the topography supportive of any kind of development. When the applicant is presenting, I will, in the meantime, pull up the zoning map and I will have an answer for you.
Well, so I guess what I'm getting at is, let's just assume for a second it's zoned industrial, which you think it's not, and that's okay. So presumably a cell phone tower could be put up there. So I just want to understand the surety from our standpoint that this is going to remain a green space, an open space. So for example, if in the future the parcel were to change ownership, and the new owner went to the city of Rochester Hills and received approval for some electronic communications device to be erected there. Is there a risk of that, or do we have some mechanism to prevent that?
No, although that parcel is located within the city of Rochester Hills, it is owned by the applicant, and through this site plan and special projects approval, it is inherently tied permanently to 210 diversion. That parcel cannot be developed and nothing can be put on it without permission from the city first, because it is tied to the special projects itself. Putting anything else on this portion or developing any portion of it would be a violation of the special projects approval for 210 diversion. So they really cannot do that.
And so I assume if Rochester Hills was unaware of what, these implications, there'd be some course of action to say, you can't do that?
The only person who would petition the city of Rochester Hills to develop this parcel, if at all, would be the property owner, which would be this property owner, and if they happen to sell it, this parcel cannot be sold individually. It is tied forever with 210 diversion. So this whole thing will go together as a single entity. So I believe the city of Rochester Hills would be aware of it, but maybe Nick can clarify whether once the project is approved, we provide some information to the city of Rochester Hills to let them know that this parcel is now forever part of 210 diversion.
Okay, that helps answer my question. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you. Commissioners, any other questions for video? No? Okay, is the applicant here? Mr. LaChurco? Or your architect, if you don't mind coming up to the lectern, please? How you doing, sir?
Good evening. How are you? Thank you for having us. My name is Jim Epping. I'm a land planner, landscape architect working with Joe LaChurco and his team. Mr. LaChurco is here tonight and certainly able to answer any questions. Mr. Chairman, with your permission, I'll go through a brief presentation. I think Vidya has done such a thorough job. I'll show more pictures and talk more descriptively about our vision for the project and how it's evolved to this point. And then obviously happy to answer any questions. I recognize that we have some new members, some members
Exactly.
haven't
I
seen
think
it.
that's a great idea, and there's a lot of people here in the public. This may be the first time that you're seeing this as well, and it would be good for everyone to do it again. So please, the floor is yours.
That'd be great if I can minimize this, and we'll pull up our plans. Let's see as well as I once did. Perfect. So again, as Vidya pointed out, we're really appreciate the opportunity to look at these as one comprehensive plan. The reason they are different parcels are really simply from an ownership point of view. Mr. LaChurco is the primary principal of both projects and will remain so. Like many land development projects, there's an LLC that's put together because they came at different times. There's technically two separate applications, but we're really looking at them as one community and one development. So it's, I think, important to understand how everything works together from the community. In total, we've got about 5.8 acres of land. Obviously, the majority of that is in the northern piece, which is the Van Horn trucking, and then the southern piece, 210 diversion, is the smaller piece with that arm that goes up into Rochester Hills. What I'd like to do is play about a 50-second video. We'll go through that. I'll talk a little bit. We didn't put it to music or anything, but I think it provides a lot of description of how the property looks today and how we envision it being developed. So now we're looking at from the bridge on Rochester down. The building on the right-hand side is an existing building, existing office building. Our three buildings, the preserves, the lighter buildings to the back, and then the 210 here in the foreground. Coming down onto the ground, previously we presented to the commission and we received some really good feedback that our buildings were a little more congested and blocking some views, so we've opened those views up and really tried to drive attention to the green space, to the river and so forth. This is backing up over diversion over the existing bridge, coming down again the existing building to the left, looking straight ahead at 210 diversion. That's what it looks like today. We'll be looking at the new building and then to the preserves to the right. We'll be extending the sidewalks, the public sidewalks, and now turning into the site. Again, our big change from last fall was opening up that view, so now we look west into the sunset and into the river area. The buildings on the right, the preserves, are 5 stories. The building on the left, the diversion, is 4 stories. That green area in the middle is the area that was described as that easement, and I'll talk about that in a minute. Both of the preserves will have a first floor center lobby. The rest of the first floor are unglazed windows into the parking structure. Here's that retaining wall that'll have the fence on it, and then the detention pond in the back. The buildings really are described to be 4-sided. There is no really true front or back because they're visible from all sides. Coming up that greenway and then looking at 210 diversion there. Each of the residences on all three buildings will have large balconies, usable balconies. We don't believe in, the little tiny balconies that you can't even fit a chair. So we're looking to have very, open and outdoor spaces within each of the units. I'll skip over the zoning again. Vidya covered that. I think the important thing from our point of view is we are seeking a special projects delineation and ideally a recommendation. Some of that stems back, frankly, because we started this project about 2 or 3 years ago, and that was really our option. In the meantime, the city has updated its master plan. It's identified these as multifamily residential zoning, actually with, I think, up to 6 stories. We're below that. But our proposal as it stands now, we believe, and I think Vidya confirmed that, is consistent with the vision of the master plan in terms of residential use, in terms of building type, in terms of parking and everything else. So it's consistent with the master plan. I suppose theoretically we could have kind of backed up even further and applied for a zoning change, but at this point we're already moving ahead with the special projects that's within your special project district, so it made sense to us to keep on that path. Next time I will send the color plans to Vidya because I think that they help a little bit more in terms of presentation, but what we like to do is, as I say, look at it as a unified campus plan. We're really looking at extending the River's Edge neighborhood into this area. There's about, as I said, 5.8 acres. Nearly 50% of that will remain green space, open space, undeveloped or at least natural looking areas. Some of that, of course, will be within detention, but it really becomes, we think, a very, very green project. That's important not only for the use of the residents and the rest of the city, but we recognize the fact that we're on the Clinton River here, and there's a lot of habitat, that natural habitat along that riparian zone that's important, critical to the ecology, critical to the city, and so maintaining this as a green site, frankly, making it a lot greener and less polluted than it is under its current brownfield condition. We're excited and proud to be able to kind of return that to the community. The preserves, looking at them individually, as Vidya had mentioned, we're proposing 2 buildings, 2 5-story buildings. There'll be 1 level of ground floor parking with 4 levels of residential above it, a total of 72 units. The buildable area is going to be perched up a little bit, and so there will be those retaining walls around it. That sets us up on a nice plane that gets us out of the floodplain, sets us level with Diversion Street, and it creates a nice little lower terrace area that really becomes the greenway along the river. We'll talk about parks and open space and an awful lot of landscaping that we'll be adding in there. We have a combination of both 1-bedroom and 2-bedroom units, and as we said, 134 parking spots within the preserves area. In terms of architecture, to slow down that video a little bit, we've gone through a lot of iterations on the architecture. Back, I don't know if it was November or so, we had a meeting with the Planning Commission. We received some really direct feedback, and we appreciated that. Really what it caused us to do is go right back to the drawing board. We looked at the architecture. We've got really talented and great architects that we've improved the materials. Again, all 4 sides of the building, I'll show you in a minute, still some additional improvements that we're excited to bring forward. But it's a building that will be here forever. It's adding to the city. It's adding to the quality to the city. We think still creates a character down here in this River's Edge neighborhood. This is the view looking at it from Diversion into the site. Again, our earlier plans had these buildings configured in more of an L-shaped pattern, which was pointed out to us, and as we looked at it more and more, we said, geez, I think they're right. Made it a little congested. By bringing the buildings parallel but offsetting them a little bit, it created a bigger green space up front, and it also opens up into the view of the detention pond and then further down into the river. Looking at it from the, I guess the south looking north, this would be in back of the southern building up along that green access easement. Again, it's a 4-sided building, so it really looks beautiful from all sides. In terms of that green 60-foot easement, the property to the south, technically, the larger property that's below our triangle in Rochester Hills, has that 60-foot easement. That's a perpetual easement. Through this process, we actually tried to acquire that land, and it just didn't work. But we are obligated, of course, to continue that access easement. We don't think that that really is buildable or will be built, but certainly, I'm not talking about our small parcel, but I'm talking about the larger parcel. If they were to start using that, that 60-foot easement would never be entirely paved, but I suppose technically it could accommodate a driveway. And so we've been really careful from a grading point of view, from a landscape point of view, from an access point of view, not to, not to eliminate those rights, but we'll continue to maintain that. It'll seem very much like a park. If in fact that land is ever used for whatever case, it would have to go through, obviously, the city of Rochester Hills. And I would assume that there would be some type of confirmation within your city as well, because it would infect this approved plan. The preserves of Rochester here, this is the back building. I'm going to come back to these in a minute, but this is the area that looks west. 210 diversion, again, it's the smaller piece down to the south. These are 21 residents total, 4-story building with ground floor parking and also that detached garage. There's a total of 37 spots, and of that, 20 are either in the main building or within that detached garage, and then there's 17 surface spaces within the parking area. What's different about the two units, and what we're focused on, is creating kind of a larger transect of residential opportunities. 210 diversion, quite deliberately, the units are a little bit bigger. The ceilings are a little bit taller. They'll both be, architecturally inside and out, be really terrific. But 210 has a smaller in-house office space, so it's probably going to be rented or occupied by people who might be adopting a home office type environment, a lot of things. The preserves don't have a specific home office opportunity, but obviously they could convert a bedroom or those type of things. But so 210 is not as tall as a building, but the floor to ceiling height is about a foot and a half taller, and it's just has a few more appointments inside to make it a slightly different market for renting. 210 diversion, we've really had some fun with this architecture in terms of the colors, in terms of the materials. We've got a green wall. I'll talk a minute about our signage, but Scott Beaton, who is a local resident, kind of an enthusiast architect and certainly a world-class designer, had volunteered and came forward and said, hey, I don't think you're doing really great with your signage. So for this project, I'll show you as well as the next, we've modified our logo just slightly to really make sure that everything's right on point. We appreciate Scott and his help both with the architecture as well as with some of the signage. This is the spot of 210 that faces west. Again, we've got the sunset, we've got this incredible greenway, and so every apartment, including the 3 terrace units that are essentially daylight apartments, they've got a below-grade patio, sliding windows, so even though they're at the terrace level or that ground level, below ground there, they still are very, very open to the sunshine and windows and so forth. 210 from the street, again, we'll work together with the city. We're aware of that right-of-way need and the need for not only landscape easement, but Mr. Gasson, I understood what you were saying in terms of a building maintenance agreement, and so we'll make sure that we work with the city for the frontage to be able to not only do the landscape, but to, should we have to maintain the building, behind the garage that is up against the state right-of-way, it's underneath the bridge essentially, but we'll be working with them for not only a construction easement, but an ongoing maintenance agreement should we do it. The back of the garage unit is fully brick, no windows or anything in the back. It's actually about half below grade because there's a slight hill there. So we don't anticipate a lot of maintenance, but it's a very good point that we'll have to make sure that we have that in order. We've also added from the last package the address and the new logo to the front of the building. We start to worry whether or not Uber Eats will be able to find our residents, so we had to make sure that the address was added to the front as well as the side of the building. In terms of improvements, we wanted to be proactive with time, and so we've worked already with the feedback that we've received from the Planning Commission. We've worked with the letters and reports that we reviewed from Vidya and from McKenna. There are 7 conditions for each, and so we've already updated our drawings. We're ready to submit those updated drawings. We don't think that they're rise to the level of having to start the process over, a new public hearing. We think they're enhancements. One of them is, on the left-hand side is the western end of the preserves looking west. And that was our previous drawing. That's the drawing that is in your packets. We looked at it, and we looked at, frankly, that view, and Joe said, let's make those end units really prime units, and so we've redesigned those end units just to put another door wall on each unit and balconies. And so the right hand is the new improved western facade compared to the previous one. So should you approve recommendation or make a recommendation for approval, we would ask that you would consider this as the current drawing, and this would be in our submission package to the City Council. Other improvements, again, are Scott's sign. We've updated the monument sign for the preserves to make it more consistent with the architecture of the building and a more updated logo. And then the 210 diversion is that logo we just talked about on both the green wall and then a smaller version on the front of the wall. In terms of a landscape plan, Vidya and the McKenna team had pointed out that for the preserves, there's actually, depending on where you're looking in your ordinance, either the sustainability chart or the actual landscape chart, there's two different ways to interpret the landscape requirements or the tree replacement. We did that incorrectly initially, so we've already redone our landscape plan to be consistent with the actual ordinance. And net, we've added an additional 42 trees to the preserves landscape. So we're meeting the full requirements compared to our misinterpretation before. So there's 42 additional trees that are in the packet. Should you consider it, we'll go to the City Council for their review. One thing I'd like to point out, we talked about this at the last meeting, in terms of irrigation and the site and kind of the importance of that riparian zone along the river's edge. Certainly within 210 and all around the buildings and what I'll say the livable area around the buildings of the preserve will all be irrigated, sod lawn, full landscape, beautifully maintained. Along the river, we're going to be removing some of the trees. We'll talk about the trees in a minute. We're going to be adding in a substantial number of additional trees. We're going to be regrading it and putting down a prairie seed mix that would be considered a low mow mix. We're not proposing to irrigate along the river because we think it's important to kind of return that area to nature. We'll still have the path. We'll mow about 4 or 6 feet on each side of the path so it's maintained. But we don't want to put down chemicals. We don't want to interrupt any of the habitat along the river. I know there's some organizations within the city and within kind of the whole Clinton River watershed that feel, great importance to obviously the health of that river, and we don't want to over-maintain it, should I say. So along the edge, it will be lightly maintained, still be beautiful, still be usable, but not irrigated and not fertilized. With that, let me just go through a couple of the questions that we had. We talked about the sign. We just talked about the landscape at the river. Someone asked, and I think Vidya asked about the rooftop equipment. There won't be any rooftop equipment on any of the 3 buildings. All the HVAC equipment will be ground mounted. We've updated the landscape plans to show screening around all those, so you won't see any of the, from the bridge or as you're coming down, you won't see anything on the roof. It'll be a finished roof. And all the HVAC equipment will be on the ground and hidden by landscaping or shielded by landscaping. The trash in the preserves, there will be a dumpster at 210 diversion in the back of the parking lot. There is internal trash rooms within the first floor or the parking area. Really, the kind of day-to-day activity of the residents would, they bring down their own trash from their unit. They put it into one of the bins interior to the building. Either trash or recycling. We deliberately put a man door on that room right outside that rideshare parking space. So, Uber can use it when they pull up, but most of the time that will be empty. A trash facility truck will come 2 or 3 times or whatever really is required from an operational point of view, 2 or 3 times a week. They'll bring the trash out of that room, put it in their truck, put the receptacle back into the room. And so that internal room will accommodate about 3 large industrial-sized bins, as well as a recycling bin and it'll be maintained both by property management staff as well as the residents themselves. The correction of the driveway, we've already taken care of that. It really was just a typo. The driveway at 210 is and will be 24 foot wide and correctly noted. We talked about the right-of-way landscape, both maintenance as well as building maintenance. The utility leads on both buildings, and particularly at 210, because you really look at that, the utility leads will be all internal to the building. They'll come into the building. There won't be a bank of meters. The exterior meters will be lower. They're shielded by the landscape. But we talked, I think, at the last meeting that there's not going to be conduit all over the building. That kind of postcard shot of the front of 210 is very important to us. But as I mentioned, they're four-sided buildings, so all the leads will be internal to the building, and everything will be shielded with either architecture or landscaping. Deviation, the only deviation that we're aware of is that front setback for the preserves building, just the northernmost preserves building. I don't have those numbers in front of me. I think that the requirement might be 25 and might be 30 and we're providing 25. I did note it on the drawings, and I don't have them in front of me, but I know that was the only deviation that we expected. And then the maintenance easements we talked about. Last thing I'd like to talk about, and I appreciate your time, I know it's a busy meeting, is at the last meeting, Mr. Kenju was nice enough to really spend an awful lot of time looking at the trees, and I wanted to acknowledge that. Joe and I went back out to the site, and we looked at these groups of trees along the river. And we're always kind of in this give and take of we want to save trees, but we want to remove the trees that are either, old or dead or anything. And you'll see on our plan that we are saving 3 major groups of trees along the river. Not only are we saving the trees, but we're saving all the undergrowth and kind of scrub growth within it. And then we're clearing out areas between it where, as you're on that path, you'll have views to the river. We looked at those a little closer. You'll see that our plans don't specifically remove any additional trees, only because when I said, Joe, is really the right way to do that, I think, is as we get into construction and we work with the city, that we might come out and say, hey, there's out of these 6 trees we thought we were going to save, clearly 2 have either died since we started or really do need to be removed. But we struggled back and forth with, we don't want to undermine that slope so much that we start to compromise the river. And so as a result, we're planning on keeping those groupings, adding in all that new landscaping, and continuing to work with it as we get closer to the construction. So with that, I appreciate your time and the detail. We're here to answer questions, and should you have any additional questions, we certainly would appreciate a recommendation to the City Council, but we want to make sure we get it right with you.
Sure. Okay. With that, Commissioners, any questions for the applicant? I'm sorry, Mr. Gass, go right ahead.
You opening up for just general conversation or only questions to?
Well, general conversation, yes,
Okay.
go ahead, yeah.
What a great evolution of this project. It's now been several years, and I'm really happy the way it's kind of ended up and being presented to us. Very handsome buildings. I think the site improvements in terms of the way the visuals are for the site from the passerby or down at Diversion, also at the bridge, are really nicely done. And the architecture, I think, has been greatly improved as well.
Thank you.
I'm glad your team has been patient and stuck to the project, and
Yeah.
I don't know how many times you guys have been up here, but it's more than 2 or 3.
It feels like the first time.
It feels like the first time. So,
Me too.
with that being said, there's a couple things. Obviously, there's a lot of work in coordinating, getting these plans together. A couple questions and maybe just some comments. The monument sign that you kind of ended the presentation with looks really good to me, I think. It's not on the site plan, though, so I think just to kind of tighten up the document,
Yep.
it needs to be on the site plan. It's on the landscape and it's on the property line. If I could take that as the way it's really meant to be, that's a question. Should it be on the property line?
Okay,
When you put it on the site plan, you put it in the right place, I'm sure.
okay, we'll double check that.
We talked a little bit about the infrastructure, utilities, and I appreciate how you are gonna handle the 210. I'm concerned about the transformer, those are usually in between the street and the building, and that's all frontage. So however you're gonna screen a transformer there, also at the preserves, because the same kind of thing, your mechanical rooms are on the front of those buildings. So they need to be treated, I think, with aesthetics in mind, for sure.
And I think they should be on the site plan too, just so everybody knows where you're intending to put them. Snow removal, I think, is easy on 210 version, you just push it into your vacant land, but I'm not sure how you're gonna deal with it with the fence at the pond on the reserves. And I'm curious on what your thoughts are on how you're gonna deal with that. Loose parking in the snow season, or are you trying to push it somewhere out of the way? That would be a question. I don't think we need an answer. I think it needs to be conscientiously incorporated somehow. Maybe that comes to question at the city council if it moves on from here.
Good point.
EV chargers, I think, were indicated on the plans. I don't know which one was on preserves at 210. But it won't, in terms of, there is a product shown, but there isn't a location shown or a number. It makes sense that they'd be included based on the audience you're trying to reach, I think, with these units. What are your thoughts? I mean, you could follow up with that and tell me what you're
Yeah.
thinking. And on the preserves, this is just an observation. We have the detention that's gonna collect water, it's gonna hold water, right? And you have the storm in the main drive coming down, and you have 3 catch basins, but 2 of them are very far apart. And I'm wondering if you're gonna do any stormwater detention in the parking lot, or if it's all meant to be taken away from the parking lot and put into the pond. If so, that distance looks big, in my opinion. There's one that's 100-plus feet apart.
I'm sorry, Mr. Where you're saying for the preserves or for 210?
Preserves.
So 210 will be underground detention.
I know your
The
storage.
preserves will, as we go through final engineering, we'll work through this. At this point, there is an anticipation there'll be some cleaning and some storage within the parking lot before it gets there, but we still have to go through that final engineering
Okay.
should we get there with city council.
So it's symbolic at this point, in some respect, the location and number of drains.
Correct, you're right. We still have to go through final engineering.
Okay, I could accept that. You explained the trash. I think that'll be a real interesting challenge. Hopefully it works out as nicely as you said, and perhaps it will. HVAC, you said, is not on the roof, but I'm curious where on the site, because you mentioned it's going to be on the site somehow.
So the plan that, I apologize, you don't have in front of you, but we have updated, should this go to the city council, we can make that available. We've sent a draft copy to the city, and I'm sure they can share it, but on the preserves, on both the north and the south, so not on the parking lot side, the individual air conditioner units will be on the areas not below the patios, but in the brick areas. Let me show you a picture. I guess I do have a mouse. So they'll be in these areas here. We've adjusted this landscaping so that we have evergreen hedges in front of the air conditioning units that'll be here, and then they'll be likewise on the back or the southern part of the other building.
Will those type of systems require like through-wall louvers or ventilation at each one of those units and potentially change the elevation?
I don't anticipate any, our architect's not here, and I can't answer that specifically, but I understand the question. We can find that out. The architecture's really quite far along, and you'll see that in your packets, and so we don't anticipate any, but Joe, unless you can add to that, I don't know that we'll have any louvers or anything like that. There'll be a standard air conditioner unit condenser on the ground.
Okay, so.
Are you talking about like screening around it?
No, I'm really talking about, I think he handled the way the units on the ground was screened, but I'm more particular interested in now that that's the system, is that system require louvers through that wall? Are we gonna
Oh, I
see
see, I get
a
you.
new
Yep.
element on the building
Right.
facade that sometimes can be kind of dominant?
And where my mind goes is you'll see it kind of in a hotel where you'd see a louver underneath various hotel windows. We don't anticipate that, but I don't know that to the detail of that, so we'll find out.
Okay, I appreciate that. And the handicap parking or barrier-free parking is indicated on the plan, site plan.
Yes, sir.
It may be engineering and landscape as well, but I looked at the site plan primarily for my review. And they're there, but not all the ramping at the sidewalk isn't shown. And there's good ways to do that and bad ways to do it. And the signage is shown at the front edge of the parking, which doesn't work too well because the person driving is afraid to get close to the curb because the signs there should be on the opposite side of the
back side of the
sidewalk.
sidewalk.
I think for the optimum outcome, that's, I think, a good standard. you know, with the way the preserves work, as with 210 also, you have, I'll call it, two different parking facilities, one parking lot and one covered. And ADA requires that each type of parking facility has ADA parking within it, so
Inside now.
you should have some inside as well. And it may be that there's not so many that it doesn't reach the threshold of the requirement, but if it does, I would definitely say it has to have them, and I'm, you know, certainly a proponent of doing it even if it's not required.
Agreed.
And just a curious question, a couple of these now are just more like comments. The site plan shows what looks like a garage door on the preserves to the, and it's called an opening on the elevations. I'm not sure it really matters one way or the other in terms of an approval, but it should be consistent, I suppose.
It is an opening. There won't be a gate or anything that closes. It'll be permanently open.
Probably better. And then lighting, you have your lighting photometrics on the preserves, and I don't see any pole lighting through that main centerpiece. All I see is building lighting and bollards. I think what those little jet out green spaces with trees probably meant to be pole lighting, but your photometrics show it as bollard lights.
You know, interestingly, we specifically designed it with bollards, and you'll see the bollards not only in those jet out areas, but along the way, and then we'll also have quite a bit of lighting on the building.
Okay.
And working with our photometric company, knowing that they're LEDs, in fact, it's a Michigan-based LED company manufacturer, we like that idea for two reasons. Is A, within those bump out areas, we can still plant a tree. So often if we put a big pole light, then we can't plant a tree in that area. And we wanted to design that center entrance to feel somewhat like a street, you know, where it had sidewalks on both sides and street trees and benches on both sides. So we did it with bollard lighting, as well as bollard lighting at a pretty tight spacing along the front of the building. And then we get into the pole lights as we go further into the parking lot. And our photometrics, when you combine that with the ambient light of each of the porch lights and the lights at the entranceway, seems to be really well lit and appropriately lit. We do have a pole light at the entrance at diversion, so at least there'll be kind of a marquee pole light there, but then the bollards coming in.
I think that's awesome. The photometrics worked, it just seemed odd that I saw the two
Innovative,
pictures.
I use the word innovative rather than
Innovative, okay,
odd.
very creative, I like it. But into that point, it's very creative or innovative. On the west side, why don't you just continue the bollards? I think you're gonna have two pole lights on that other end, and might as well be consistently
Yeah,
nice.
we could look at that. We didn't want to overlight the area, so we could look at that.
I
as
think
well.
it's an awesome idea. The bollards, I think, are great. Like I said, the photometrics work, or look like they work. I just didn't see how you did it without having the pole lights. And two other questions. The emergency stairs for the units would exit into the site typically, and one does, but you have one exiting into the garage. And I didn't know where to draw the line from a site plan review that I'm basically doing.
Right.
The parking lot under the building is part of the site, and the parking lot outside the building is part of the site, but your exit is into the covered part, which I'm just bringing up as a question, if you don't need to look at that differently from a life safety standpoint. That's really out of the realm of site plan, but they land in the site plan the way I looked at it, parking on one side of the other of the wall. And that's all the questions I had or comments. I think you answered them all. There's a couple follow-ups that
I
I
appreciate
expect
the
to see in
detail.
the council package. I'm gonna have some for 210, but if you want to entertain other questions on reserves.
Thank you. Those are all excellent questions. Any other questions on the preserves for the applicant?
Reserves.
No?
I just have a couple comments. In reviewing the previous meetings and presentations, just want to say it's obvious there's a lot of collaboration and iteration, and just want to acknowledge that it was a very impressive process that got us to today. So just wanted to acknowledge that. I also want to thank you for the rideshare and Uber Eats signage. As someone who utilizes those frequently, I think those are nice features. I was going to comment too on the EV parking stations, charging stations. It seems like that might be a feature that your clientele would be, or the residents would be interested in. And then I think my last comment is for the city administration. I asked that the baseline data for housing affordability indicator and the sustainability evaluation that Vidya mentioned, my ask is just that those numbers get updated as soon as they can and that we follow through on that, because I think it's a really important indicator for understanding the sustainability of the projects that come before us. So if we can update that and follow through, that'd be great.
Duly noted.
I have a couple questions, and this is more focused on the retention pond there, as it pertains to the preserves. And these are some questions that I've had, but also some other people from the public have asked me as well. So I just want to run through them with you, if that's okay. On 210 diversion, it's an underground system, correct?
Correct.
And in the preserves, it's an above-ground system. Is there, it could be any answer, frankly, but is there a reason why one is below and one is above? Is there a particular
Really-
reason why one was done?
Two reasons really is, one is just real estate. We just don't have that much room on the preserves. I suppose, again, we could have kind of reshuffled the project and combined the lots and turned them into one, but both for the entity reason and other reasons we explained, we didn't. So they really are meant to be standalone projects. In fact, because of permitting, we know that 210 will go first, even though they'll be developed as a campus, but 210 will go first and really be a standalone project. And then the preserves, after we secure all the permitting along the river and everything else, would quickly follow. We also, on the preserves property, have an existing floodplain that you'll see in some of the engineering drawings. And part of the engineering is shifting that floodplain to the west. And part of that is creating that detention basin. We're going to then build up that building pad, take that area out of the floodway. And so it's a combination of sequencing the projects as well as just the engineering of moving that floodplain that led us to that.
Is there an anticipated depth of that detention pond?
I'd have to look at the drawing specifically. I want to say it's roughly 6 feet. We did make sure that we've got the side slope.
Slope, okay.
It'll be aesthetically very, very similar to the pond that's right back here at the City Hall.
Okay.
Lined with rocks, but able enough that if someone was to fall into it, they could easily walk out based on the side slope.
The slope.
We'll continue to work with engineering through that final permitting.
Another question that I have that was asked as well from some other people is, has there been a calculation or a determination of the volume of like, let's say we have a very substantial storm, a rainfall event that lasts 2 or 3 days or something. Is there the potential for that to overflow and then flow into the Clinton River? I mean, is that something that would be completely remarkable or unremarkable or unheard of, or is it catastrophic? I just want to make sure, because it is close to the Clinton River. Obviously, things are flowing in there, and I just want to make certain that we preserve that integrity.
Well, I'll bring our engineer to answer that
Sure.
technically, but I'll give you my speculation. Kind of
Please,
feeling
that's fine.
is that pond really is meant to become a very natural pond. You know, it'll be created, but then it will go essentially back to nature in terms of having, you know, plant life within it. So it'll be constantly clean. It's not to be, you know, thought of as a, you know, any type of brown water or anything else like that. But obviously, it does have a process where it'll collect the storm water and direct it there and ultimately clean it. I don't know the grade specifically. I'd be kind of guessing in terms of a catastrophic event, but it is part of the floodplain, and occasionally that whole area is designed either naturally or through some of the changes that ultimately, at certain times, you know, every couple of years, that whole area may be flooded.
Sure.
And the landscaping and kind of that natural easement of landscape along the river will help continue to clean that.
Okay, that's all I have on that. Thank you very much for answering those questions. With respect to 210 diversion, Mr. Gasson, did you have questions as well?
Yeah, a few, and some of them, my questions have been answered already, and some of my comments on the preserves are the same, the EV chargers, the ADA ramp, at parking space in the sign, et cetera. But the two things of substance, or maybe it's just one, is your current parking count is 37, the requirement is 36.
Correct.
And right now, between the garage and the building, you have one tree, basically. I wonder if you could sacrifice one parking spot and put one tree closer to the diversion, so it kind of breaks up that long stretch of all building wall and
Right
parking
here.
lot. Yeah,
Yeah,
so
maybe even that northernmost spot there.
yeah, that would be ideal, and then add a tree on the west side. I think it would, when you showed your renderings, it kind of made it more apparent when I was.
I guess we cut it off a little bit here, but you're saying, I'm not against the idea. You know, as a landscape architect, I love the idea of adding more trees. I'm trying to balance it as we're talking here with the EV charger, because if it's an EV charger, it's not as flexible of a space, so maybe if we can work with the city and say, you know, how do we, maybe just the preserves ends up having EV charger, or maybe we put an EV charger inside the building here, but I like the idea of adding that extra tree.
If you can, I think it would be a betterment to that view down that parking aisle, yeah. And I did have a little bit of a concern about the garage car backing out into what is really a drive that's, you know, cross pathways of it. I suppose that just becomes, you know, everybody knows to be careful. It looks like one of those situations that is questionable. Usually when you back out of a garage, you're backing into your drive.
Right, we thought of it, I mean, because it's not a through street, it's a good point, because it's not a through street, and because it's a fairly small population there, we think it's gonna be very, very similar to, I always call them kind of the Royal Oak townhomes, but I know we have them here in Rochester too, where you have kind of townhomes that back to back, and they have that shared lane, and you know, people back out safely, so we don't, it's a concern, but I think given the fact that it's not a through street, there's really no speed going through there, we should be safe.
Neighbors just have to be neighbors. And the last thing was, a little bit was talked about in terms of 210 being a little, I'll call it upscale from the preserves. And our checklist talking about affordability, where, if I could ask, would these fall? What kind of rent, lease charges could we see for these kind of properties?
You know, and I'll ask Joe if he wants to, it's such, I've learned, frankly, a long time ago, for getting in trouble is the project is probably, as we said, 18 months away from really being ready to be sold. So much of whether it's a for sale or for rent is based on square footage. And we've listed the square footage. I think the 2 bedrooms in 210 are about 1,600 square feet, so whatever the market rate is for that size apartment, we would anticipate that. They're really meant to be market rate housing. The apartments in the residences in the preserves are a little bit smaller, 1 and 2 bedroom as well. So I'd be guessing again if I just set a price now, but they're not. When we were here last month, Mr. Lombardo was here presenting really kind of a beautiful building concept on the early stages on Main Street, and I think quite deliberately was looking for kind of a real luxury unit. Frankly, that looked awesome to me. These are not intended to be that. These are intended to be really great homes that any of us will be proud of. There is a trend. You know, I've got young 20-year-old kids. They're all in apartments, right? We all started off in apartments. Probably everyone in this room had an apartment at one time. What's really changed, and there's been more and more literature on it, is people, the median age of renters is going up and up and up, particularly in urban areas where, frankly, you guys are just out of space. And so the idea of building a substantial number of new single-family homes in the city is becoming difficult, but people still want to live in a city like Rochester. And so apartments or for rent units or condos or townhomes are becoming more and more popular. And so we're seeing the median age of apartment dwellers going up, and with that goes up a little bit of the cost as well as some of the amenities within them. So this building probably hits more that market, and the preserves more the younger market.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from any of the commissioners on 210? Mr. Lord, go ahead.
One real quick.
Of course.
And I also say you guys have done a great job with evolving this along the way. I think we've landed at a really nice looking project here. On this rendering, on the right side, there's an egress, like a basement egress right there, I believe.
Yes.
How are they moving to the sidewalk or to the parking lot? Are they walking across the grass there?
There's no staircase or anything. There'd be some type of an emergency egress. You know, the fire department have to get down.
So it's
there
just
and
emergency?
Just an emergency, right. There's no, there was actually, you can see them just barely here, but there would be a wrought iron fence there. So there is no individual front door entry there that they would get out of unless it was an emergency situation. Okay. They'd go through the building and out to the lobby, which is on the other side.
Okay, because there's a door swing that indicates on the site plan right there in that corner.
The door swing that goes into the unit?
Well, it's just listed as a basement unit egress stairway, and then the outlet right there on the.
Joey, is there an egress going up there? Just a gate.
Just for emergency? Okay, okay.
Okay. Any other questions from commissioners? Okay, so Mr. Banda is, again, last week, Fire Chief, please, step up to the lectern. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you. Just a comment for Planning Commission and our developers to consider. I know we like to keep aesthetics and utilities shielded, but please consider the way you shield them. If you take a look at 804 Main Street, the three-story building there, on the north side, those gas meters were shielded with living vegetation. So guess what that living vegetation has done to the gas meters? It's now blocked the ability to get to them. However, if you take a look at First Street Lofts on Mill and the alleyway, you'll see the way that those were blocked off were with a very attractive fence that was metal that fit right into it. So when we take a look at blocking utilities, I'm asking for the Planning Commission and our developers to keep that in mind about accessibility and keeping things shielded to go ahead and comply with the desires of the Planning Commission and aesthetics. But please consider the way we're shielding them and with what material we're doing that with. Especially when we're taking a look at transformers and shielding them with landscape materials such as trees or yews or something along those. Those have a tendency to dry out and many times will die and then have to be maintained. Or we've never had a transmission or a transformer ever explode in town. That's a joke, and you don't want the landscaping to be close to add to the fire. And then just one comment about egress doors that you asked. Any door that's used for egress must have a hard surface from that door to the right-of-way or to a public way so that people can exit. They can't exit across the grass. They have to exit on a sidewalk. Thank you for your consideration to those comments.
Thank you very much. Duly noted. Okay, so, Mr. Banda, last time, it came to City Council for a public hearing, do I open the floor up to, so that's it? Well,
You don't have, you could, but we already had the public hearing.
we already did that, okay, right, because it's a little bit out of sequence because of the last time, so, okay, so that being said, I think at this point, having heard from Vidya, having heard from the applicant, questions having been asked and answered by the commissioners to the applicant, at this time, I would ask, and we should probably do two separate ones, correct? Because there's two separate projects. So what we will need are two separate motions for each project for approval for special project and site plan review. And for those in the public, just to understand, it would be approved here, the motion would be approved, and then it would go to City Council for their final review, and we would kind of do this one more time in front of City Council. Is that correct? Okay, so applicants, you understand that there's still another hurdle to have to overcome, and that's City Council, but this is one more step along the way, okay?
Understood.
Okay, did I do that? Mr. Bandit, please go ahead.
Perfectly. Chairman, when now Councilwoman King was here, she had asked about a development agreement about restoration bonds. So we had
Yes,
that
yes.
conversation with the developer, and Mr. Churko's working, his attorney's working with our attorney. So by the time we get to City Council, it'll probably be a modified development agreement. The Randazzo one was really complicated because it was done in phases and
Right.
different locations with townhomes versus phased buildings. So we've taken that to heed, and we will have that at City Council where we'll have basically it's if the project started and stopped, well, the bond need to be created, a surety bond, letter of credit, whatever we do, to make sure the land would go back to the process.
A restoration bond.
Restoration, that's it.
Right, okay, so for purposes of the motion for both projects, we understand that's gonna be brought up as part of City Council, so it doesn't necessarily have to be reflected today. We could talk about it, but it doesn't
You
necessarily.
could say subject to
Okay.
a agreeable development agreement for restoration. That would be fine to put in the motion.
Okay, so that being said, is there a motion for, let's start with the Preserves project? Mr. Gasson.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a recommendation for a special project that we, as a commission, forwarded to City Council for consideration and approval, considering the 7 recommendations within the planner's report, that we get a development agreement for restoration by the time it gets to City Council, and that we accept the improved elevations as presented by the applicant tonight, as well as the added trees, 42 that they suggested.
Okay, thank you.
And I would just add, and that's the accompanying site plan that goes with the special project, just, I think we should say that in the motion.
And the company site plan that goes along with it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, is there support?
Support.
Mr. Lord, support. Okay, discussion? Roll call, please.
Hauser,
Yes.
Vixen,
Yes.
Bachman,
Yes.
Clauser,
Yes.
Gasson,
Yes.
Kenjuk,
Yes.
Lloyd.
Yes.
Sounded like Hauser again, so sorry about that.
Might happen.
Yes, that's okay.
Give me
Okay,
a heart attack a couple times.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Okay, so then, similarly, we'll have a motion for 210 diversion. Is there a motion for that particular project?
So moved. Okay. You said.
Okay, Mr. Gasson, do you want to reiterate, or just mirror what you said for the record?
I'll support that with a friendly amendment
Okay,
of the applicant doing what it can to add a tree in the parking in lieu of 37 or one excess parking space.
okay, wonderful. Okay, so motion by Mr. Gasson, is that right? No, motion by Mr. Kenzik, support by Mr. Gasson, discussion. Roll call, please.
Hauser,
Yes.
Vixen,
Yes.
Bachman,
Yes.
Clauser,
Yes.
Gasson,
Yes.
Kenjuk,
Yes.
Lloyd.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, sir. Good luck on your project, and we'll see you up at City Council.
We certainly appreciate all the time we've taken from you and for the public and the really great questions. I think it has made it a better project, so thank you. I took a lot of notes today, appreciate the details. We'll update the site plans, we'll work with the city, and we'll, accommodate this as well going into the City Council.
Appreciate it. It's a very good project, and I appreciate all the effort that you and your team put into it. You listened to everything that we had to say. I know we were a little bit critical that first meeting, but it turned out to be a great, great project at the end, and it's a good thing for the city. It's a good thing for the area, and we're very happy, so thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bring your
Chairman,
video back.
if I
Yes, sir.
may, just based on what happened at the last meeting, we went ahead to City Council this past Monday to not penalize the developer for missing the quorum, and we scheduled a public hearing for the, we have to wait 30 days from that meeting, so I think it's March 25th is our meeting. This is scheduled for City Council, so the second meeting of March, so we didn't lose an extra
That's-
14 days.
That's correct. The next, you will be in front of City Council on Monday, March 25th, 7 o'clock.
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay, wonderful. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Next is consideration for the Paint Creek Townhomes Development at 704 Woodward, special project and site plan review, and this is a request to set a public hearing date. Mr. Banda.
Right, so I'm gonna correct, this right out of the gate, this is not a special project,
Right.
it was a typo here. It's there's a rezoning request from it should have been more thorough, so from the present industrial, there's a rezoning request, which video will go over this, to RM1. It's just a straight up request. The master plan, which video will talk about, is called for RT, and there's an explanation of that process. So this would be, the process would be rezoning, and then a site plan that accompanies it, conditioned on the approval of city council approving rezoning. So this body would make a recommendation to city council for the rezoning, and then, but this body is responsible for approving the site plan conditioned on a rezoning at city council. So
Okay.
they will be together and then separated to go to council, and then if they approve the rezoning, it would be, the site plan would kick in as approved.
And just a couple questions here from a procedural perspective, because I know this is an important project. I've seen the applicant here a couple times before, and I know this is important to the neighbors and the residents locally here. We are not voting on the project today. This is not a thumbs up or thumbs down as to whether it's going to be built. This is more of an informative presentation by the applicant. They have come back with a revised set of plans, a revised set of drawings, a revised concept, frankly. And this is their opportunity to talk to us, and if there's some forward progress and some traction on our part, then we will set it for public hearing. Is that correct?
Correct, so a little more tighter than that.
Okay.
We've already had presentations. This is a actual formal
Okay, so this
submittal
is- yep.
seeking rezoning,
Okay.
seeking site plan approval. So, doesn't mean we have to act tonight, but certainly both the rezoning and the site plan will be set for public hearings at some point, and then notice to the residents, and then that's when all the comments will come from anybody that wants to say anything. But tonight, we're trying to get to the point where we set public hearings for the rezoning in the site plan at the next available meeting, depending on the level of
Okay.
comfort you have with the site plan.
And because I want to make certain that everyone in the public has an opportunity to be heard, tonight is strictly, well, is presumably for the applicant. If it's set for public hearing, then the next meeting will be the opportunity where the public will come in, come up to the lectern and provide their comments, pros, against. et
Certainly,
cetera.
if you, as the chair, if you want to recognize somebody that has something to add.
Okay, I can do that tonight if I, okay,
Absolutely.
that's fine. I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page.
Yep.
Okay, with that being said, is it, Vidya, you have the floor.
Yes. Thank you, Chairman Hauser.
You're welcome.
Members of the commission. To clarify a little bit more, what is before you tonight is a preliminary hearing on the site plan and a preliminary hearing on the rezoning to set the rezoning for a public hearing. So to go over the background of this project, the request before you is from Mr. Humbrowski on behalf of the Champion Development Group to redevelop an existing vacant industrial site. I'll pull up the site plan on screen. Into 45 luxury townhomes along the Paint Creek. The site has a total area of 3.81 acres. It's north of Woodward, and it is commonly referred to as the former Solaronics facility site. The site is currently zoned I1, which is limited industrial district. Residential uses are not permitted in the I1 district. So the applicant's proposal is to rezone the property from I1 to RM1, which is multiple family residential 1 district. Typically, rezoning cases are processed with just a concept plan associated with them. But in this case, the applicant has submitted a full detailed site plan because they would like the rezoning request to go in tandem with site plan approval, which is also a procedure that is quite often followed. I want to summarize a few key features of this project for the benefit of the commission and the residents who are attending the meeting or who are listening in. So the project basically is going to feature 45 townhouse units. These are 2 to 3 bedroom units, 2.5 stories high, less than 30 feet in height. The existing industrial building and all associated improvements on the site are to be completely demolished. The site is to be rezoned from I1 to RM1. Now, the future land use plan that was adopted by the city designates the subject site as 2-family residential. And the ordinance has got a specific definition for what exactly a 2-family development site looks like. So although the RM1 request by the applicant technically is not consistent with the written letter of the master plan, the RT, we provided a comparison table, which I will go over, on what is the difference between developing the site as an RM1 parcel versus what if it were developed as an RT parcel. So under the master plan designation of RT, which is 2-family, a lot size is 3,200 square feet per unit. Whereas in this case, for RM1, the size depends on the entire parcel. The number of square footage per unit varies. The density allowable for this property under the RT zoning recommended by the master plan is 52 units. What the applicant is proposing is 45 units. It is basically a reduction in the density allowable. The maximum permitted building height under RT is 2.5 stories or 35 feet. What the applicant is proposing is 2.5 stories, less than 30 feet. The required front yard setback for the RT is 25 feet. What the applicant is proposing from Woodward is 40 feet. The side yard, single side yard for the RT district is 5 feet. The combination of both the yards put together has to be 15 feet. What the applicant is proposing is 14 feet for a side yard, a combined side yard of 28 feet. The required rear yard for the RT district is 35 feet. The proposed rear yard setback here, which would be along Paint Creek to the north, is 54.4 feet. Based on our discussions with the city staff and city administration and the projects that have come onto this parcel over the past year or so, it is our understanding, at least what we got out of it, is this property is preferred to be developed at a lower density. The previous proposals that came before the Planning Commission were not so well received owing to realistic considerations and concerns about traffic and other issues that would be in the neighborhood, especially the fact that this parcel happens to be an industrial parcel that is sort of located at the western edge of other industrial parcels, such as the DPW yard, but further to the west, it is all single-family residential neighborhoods. At this time, while the proposed development is not consistent with the RT recommended by the master plan, it is a development of a lesser density than recommended by the master plan and more in line with what has been discussed with regard to this site before at the Planning Commission. So the development is designed mostly, in most part, to comply with the RM district multiple family residential district standards that currently exist in our zoning ordinance. If the property is rezoned to RM1, the proposed townhouse development would be a principal permitted use, or what is also called as a use by right. It is not a special exception use. It would not be a special project. It will simply be a use that has to be built in compliance with every single ordinance requirement. There will be no deviations granted, there will be no flexibility, and there will be no modifications to any of the zoning standards being proposed or granted with site plan. With regard to the details of the project, some of the minor details that I had pointed out at the time I did my review letter, which I believe since then the applicant has already made the revisions to the plan, and I would defer to them to address those concerns, but I'm bringing them up so the Planning Commission knows what they're looking at on the screen in front of them. I'd ask for the zoning designation of the abutting properties to be noted. I believe that zoning designation is shown on the cover sheet, not specifically on the sheet, so that requirement is met. The site shows a single access drive coming off Woodward, and this basically goes in a loop around a center triangular parcel and then exits back onto Woodward. All of these are designed as internal drives. These are not roads. These are not any specified easement roads. They are 24-foot wide pavement, which is the minimum width of a pavement required for two-way movement of vehicles and also for fire access. Because the pavement is only 24 feet, no on-street parking is permitted anywhere within this development. With regards to the units that are shown over here, at the time I did my review, my concern was why do these 4 units have sidewalk connectors that are shown going to the sidewalk along Woodward? So the applicant has explained that these units are designed so that the front entry is more accented. So they look more like townhouses that would be on Main Street. And the sidewalk connectors basically improve their appearance as walkable units. So they keep them more residential in scale and scope by providing them with these connectors rather than just keep the entire area as a greenbelt. Based on the ordinance standards that 2 parking spaces are required for a 2-bedroom unit, 3 spaces are required for a 3-bedroom unit, the site requires a total of 127 parking spaces, of which 82 spaces are going to be located within the individual garages of the units itself. The rest of the parking spaces, some of them are shown, 4 visitor parking spaces are shown here, additional 7 visitor parking spaces are shown here, and there is the ability to park on the individual driveways fronting on each of the units. When we originally received the plan from the applicant, I will zoom in on this a little bit. The balcony, for some reason, my screen is not zooming. Okay, there we go. This is a 2nd-story feature. This basically is a 2nd-story balcony, which has got a porch underneath it. Previously, this was shown encroaching into the side yard setback, and we told the applicant to revise the plans to keep everything out of the setbacks. So the applicant has since then pulled these back so that the entire structure is now contained within the setbacks itself. When we made this comment, the applicant revised the plans. However, what happened is when the sheet was printed out, it was not printed out to scale, as a result of which it appeared that the depth of the garage is only 16 feet. I did have a meeting with the applicant a couple of days ago when they clarified that the depth of each garage will remain 20 feet. It is not going to be 16-foot deep garages. Because the applicant was trying to push these in, the scale was not adjusted. I will let the applicant explain that more in detail. I believe they do have a marked up site plan to present before you tonight, which shows you how they are going to comply with the driveway length and the garage depth of 20 feet and still meet the ordinance requirements. With regard to architectural elevations, I will go to the rendering, which will give the Planning Commission and the residents a better visual of what these units are going to look like. So these units are to be predominantly constructed of fiber cement boards and fiber cement lap siding with a foundation course of stone and architecturally enhanced garage doors. These are the front covered porch entries that you see. These are the type of porch entries that will be seen for the units that front on Woodward. And this is the rear balcony feature that will be facing Paint Creek. This is the second story balcony above a lower story porch. We defer to the Planning Commission to make any recommendations on proposed building architecture. The Planning Commission has previously looked at architecture for all residential developments within the city. So while this is a principal permitted use, should the property be rezoned and there are no specific architectural standards as such, the Planning Commission can offer its feedback on the proposed elevations that are presented before you tonight. The landscape plan basically at this time includes a landscape stabilization zone along Paint Creek. If I go back to the site plan sheet, okay. So this is the Paint Creek. This entire area, this dashed line that you see on the screen, this whole area is designated as a landscape stabilization zone, which basically means there will be no structures or any grading or other encroachment into such area. The landscape plan also proposes a planting of trees and shrubs along the site's frontages, along the front of individual units. We had expressed a concern that the site actually abuts the DPW yard over here, as a result of which these units would generally have from their second story balcony a clear view of whatever is going on in the industrial portion of the site. Based on our recommendation, the applicant has now added not just deciduous trees, but has added a solid row of evergreen trees along the entire east property line to provide some screening and buffering for the residential uses on the site from the east. Also, as an amenity in the middle of the site, there is a small triangular area which the applicant is trying to design as an amenity for residents, which basically is a fire pit, some seating area, and just a small center walkway or plaza area. This particular site has been before the Planning Commission on multiple previous occasions, and there have been a lot of concerns related to it. At this point of time, the applicant has been working with city staff to come up with a project that they believe will reflect what would be suitable for the area and at the same time address the concerns of the residents of the city. So the project is before you for discussion tonight, and should the Planning Commission find that the project does meet and address most of your concerns, your next step would be to schedule it for a public hearing on the rezoning and an action on the site plan. I would be happy to answer any questions you might have at this time.
Vidya, Vidya, thank you very much. To the commissioners, are there any questions to Vidya? Mr. Gasson, go right ahead, please.
Vidya, thank you for your report. It was very complete and comprehensive. I did have a couple questions, and I'm sure they're maybe just not requirements for a development like this. And one is, you mentioned this, the street is not a street, it's a roadway, I guess, or interior roadway. Is that similar for the sidewalks? That you mentioned there's some sidewalks going up to the Woodward facing units, but throughout the complex, they don't have sidewalks as a whole.
Yes. So, Mr. Gasson, that was a question that came up initially when I was discussing it with Nick also. Now, this site is viewed as a single property, as a single parcel. So the setbacks are from the property line. Typically, when we have a development such as an individual site condo or a platted lot, we would measure the setback from the edge of the roadway. So what you see inside over here are actually private drive aisles that are going through. It is my understanding that when the city requires the roadway to be constructed, they have specifications of what and how the roadway needs to be constructed, but there is no set requirement for the roadway being placed within a specific easement width. For example, if it were a private or a public road, you would say it needs to have a 27-foot wide curb back-to-back placed within a 60-foot right-of-way easement. There is no such requirement over here. So since these are internal drive aisles and not technically streets, we did not require sidewalks to be provided in. Also, each of these units has got a driveway in the front. So the only sidewalk connectors the applicant could possibly put are through these tiny little landscape islands, which are already so small, holding a tree. Addition of sidewalk stubs would actually defeat the purpose of having any landscaping in here. There's no way to really accommodate a sidewalk network within this site.
May I follow up?
Of course you can.
I get that point on the landscaping, makes sense. But to me, an overriding, I guess, point for this development would be the walkability of that location to all the wonderful amenities in that area, the trail, going to the park. People are gonna walk from their unit, and they're gonna be walking down the streets, or from drive to grass, from drive to grass, from drive to grass. It seems to make sense that they would have walkways. And if it's not required, it's not required, but it sure seems like it would make sense. The other question, just one final, considering it's an internal drive aisle and there's visitor parking designations, is barrier-free requirements precluded from interior drive visitor parking? Or should that also be incorporated?
I believe anytime parking is provided for public to park on, it needs to be ADA compliant. So I would say you are making a very valid point, in which case at least one of the visitor parking spaces over here or one parking space here should be designated as a true barrier-free parking spaces. Anytime a public parking spot is provided, it needs to be barrier-free accessible. So I would ask the applicant to actually address that, and I will check in with the building official too to just make sure that that is in fact a requirement over here.
I'm sorry, I have one more.
Don't be sorry, go ahead.
My final question kind of goes along the same lines of the internal drive aisle, lighting, sidewalks, et cetera. So there's only 3 lights in this whole development I see on the plan, 3 street lights. There's wall-mounted lights, but should there be lighting more than just 3 to properly light the roadway, even if it's an interior drive aisle?
Yes, the ordinance does require adequate illumination. The applicant did submit a photometric plan that shows the light illumination on the site, including all the wall-mounted fixtures, and I believe they are compliant with ordinance requirements. In fact, when I reviewed the photometric plan initially, we had asked them to turn down the illumination intensity of some of the wall-mounted fixtures because they actually exceeded the permitted light at the property lines. So at this time, their lighting that they're proposing does meet what the ordinance requires for ambient illumination. And since lighting and light pollution has been an item of discussion at the Planning Commission for a long time, I was pretty cautious about just how illuminated the site is going to be. But I'm happy to take a look at it one more time to make sure that the roadways, the drive aisles are adequately lit.
If you would, that would be great, because there's only 3 light poles in the whole development.
Absolutely. I will take a look at it again. Thank you, Mr. Kasser.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Kenzick, go right ahead, please.
Yeah,
You're welcome.
I'm not sure if I understand this landscaping plan as it borders the DPW and the FOE site. Did you say that there's going to be evergreen trees or evergreen shrubs?
I believe the trees that are seen over here, these are 70 JCH. 70 JCH, these are juniper trees, 6 foot to 7 feet in height at the time of planting.
Do we know
So all of these are going to be 6 to 7 feet in height at the time of planting. So technically, it does classify it as a tree, not a shrub.
Okay. And do we know how far apart they will be planted? Has that been determined? And also how far?
I will check on that. Typically for juniper, conical tall juniper, they are typically planted 10 feet on center because they grow together into an impenetrable hedge at that. At the same time, we want to make sure they are viable and don't overcrowd each other, but I will double check the spacing on
That's
this.
kind of what I'm leading up towards, because if I'm not mistaken, that fence, they're also going to install a fence, correct? And that fence. will
Yes, I
run
believe there is a
approximately
fence along this property line already.
Yeah, so, I guess I have some concerns about the longevity of the landscaping there, because anything that's gonna be facing that fence over time as that tree grows will probably start to thin out, and then you're gonna have probably an eyesore down the road. 10 feet, that may or may not be good enough. The question becomes.
Okay.
How much do those trees spread out in maturity? Because if they go, if those trees have a spread of, say, 20 feet, again, you're gonna have the same problem where these trees will basically compete for resources and ultimately strangle each other.
Correct.
So over time, it's gonna be an eyesore. I guess the other thing, I was thinking about is that because of the location, and I understand why they're putting in this fence, it's gonna run for about 300, 400 feet. That's pretty long. And I was just wondering, since it does border on, city property, if they could work cooperatively with the city to maybe get rid of some of the fencing and put in some berms, to break that fence up. So that would be one of my recommendations.
The challenge with a berm, Mr. Kenjuk, is for a berm, you actually need to have a slope. I do not believe there is enough area on the east property line for them to actually put in a berm wide enough to sustain trees that will not take out whatever little rear yard these units have.
Well, it may require.
The applicant can probably have a better idea of just how much we have over here and whether a berm can fit in. But definitely working with the city to figure out a solution to the fence might not be a bad idea.
Yeah, because the other thing is, if you go farther, what would it be, north on the plan, towards the Paint Creek, it shows that fence will then make a turn and go to the left on the drawing, and then it goes back up and basically stops where that one townhouse is. That might also be an area where you can get rid of the fence entirely and put in a berm or something, so that you're not looking at this long, continuous wall.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Kent, Alex?
I'm good.
Okay. Any questions on this side? No? Okay. Vidya, this is Christian. I just have a quick question. I want to make sure I understood what you had said correctly. That this is, the ask is that it be zoned RM1, and that you had said there's no deviations that could be granted, no changes. They would have to comport specifically and strictly with the requirements. Is that correct?
Correct.
And you also
If they
said,
get rezoned to RM1, they must comply with the RM1 standards.
right. And what I want to be clear on is the commission's ability to request modifications or changes to the elevations, to the materials. Does the commission have any authority to do that, or do we have to take it as is presented to us?
Our zoning ordinance does not have architectural standards specifically for residential developments. All the projects that have come forth before the Planning Commission and the City Council in the past several years have all been special projects, which has given the Planning Commission and City Council extra authority to require much higher quality architecture. In this case, if it's rezoned to RM1, we really don't have any architectural standards, so you would be able to provide feedback to the applicant, but the applicant is not mandated to make those changes.
Okay, and that's, thank you for clarifying that. That's what I wanted to be clear. So we all understand that we can give our opinion, we can give our thoughts on the aesthetic, but we can't necessarily dictate a particular material or, a style. Got it? Okay. All right, with that being said, Mr. Banda, is it appropriate to have the applicant come up to the lectern then?
Yes, sir.
Okay, would the applicant please come up and introduce yourself? Not that we don't know you, but it's good to do it again.
Yeah, we're back.
We're back, that's right. How you doing?
I'll tell you in about 45 minutes. But I think
Can't do it sooner?
I think I'm doing
That's all
pretty
right.
good.
All right,
I'll be here in 45 minutes, right?
That's all right.
All right.
No, you've got the floor. This is your opportunity, so go right in. And sir, while you're getting set up, I just want to let the public know that Vidya provided an incredible amount of information with respect to some of the designs, some of the zoning, the regulations. And she went over some data with respect to what RT and RM1 zoning is. You can find all of that information on the city website. If you go to the Planning Commission, the packet information, click the date for today, and it'll be a drop-down, and you'll see all that information. So if you didn't follow it here, if you have questions, please, I would encourage you to go back, and Vinny did a good job of comparing and contrasting what RT is and the proposed development, okay?
And there you go. Okay, are we ready or?
Floor is yours, sir.
Okay.
Yes.
Thanks. My name's Doug Hamborski. I'm with Champion Development Group. And yes, this is our more than first time here. We're very pleased to be back, though. We've worked very hard to try to keep this project going, and we were excited about what we are here to present today. So we start with a very unique site. It's got the zoned industrial. It's been industrial. It was in a little section of industrial for decades, which is trying to turn over. DPW came in, and there's some mixed commercial. But then along the top is Dinosaur Hill and, of course, Paint Creek. And on the west is the trail itself. And on the south is currently a commercial use, but there's also a wonderful big city park. So it's really a very unique location and unique features surrounding it. So brief history, our first trip to CU, we were proposing 108 units in a 4-story single building, and we chose to update that design to an 88-unit, 3-story building. You may recall those buildings weren't wonderfully received, so we chose to revision the site. Those original 2 projects could have had either condominium ownership or rental. Never got that far to determine it. So based on really your input and community input, our vision and scope have been we consider it completely revised. New vision is a luxury town home condominium community. We're proposing 45 townhomes. We like to call them townhomes instead of townhouses, but they'll be in blocks of 5 to 6 units per building, and I think there's 7, whatever 45 divided by that is per the site plan. All units will be owned. There won't be any rentals in this development. All design will be based on what I call stock RM1 zoning, as has been clarified. No variances are being requested, no special exceptions. All the requirements of RM1 zoning we are adhering to. We'd like to point out that with this project, the tax value of this property will be significantly increased. And we just want to clarify, as has been clarified, that we are presenting our site plan tonight in connection to, but not direct connection to, our rezone request to RM1. We didn't want to just come in with a rezone request and then there'd be, what do they got in mind? What are they going to do? Not only are we showing you what we have in mind, we're showing you what we'd like to do as soon as possible. The property status, currently it's really a blighted, abandoned industrial site, as we've all driven by it for many years. It's been a manufacturing plant since 1939, has had assorted industrial operations that have included paint booths. There's some underground storage tanks for heating fuel on site. Assorted environmental issues have been discovered. We had PM Environmental do a Phase 1 report, and we have to still do a Phase 2 report, but the conclusion from their Phase 1 study is that there are manageable remediation potential for the property, that the property can be restored, remediated into a very worthy site, which we're planning on. Regarding the environmental, as I just said, the condition to be fully remediated, but not just, you can remediate a site for industrial use or for a parking lot or for a retail center. Residential use is a higher standard. We will be remediating the site to a residential use and a use that a mortgage company will be able to mortgage against for our 45 homeowners. So that's a significant extra step up in environmental cleanup, if you will. One other little feature is that as part of the site design, we are including a stormwater management plan that will prevent future contamination into the creek. Right now, the site has not had a formal stormwater plan ever, and so any water flows that would have come into the parking lot or what have you would find its way wherever it would go, into the ground, into the creek, next door, on the road. This all now water will be contained on our property and managed through the stormwater management system. Quick zoning summary, here's the zoning map. Property is currently I-1, past several decades, which is the purple or the lavender color. We're requesting RM1, which is orange, and if you just look at the map, most of the areas around us are orange, directly around the property are orange. The yellow is a single family of different types, but our immediate area is really, will be in good company with the RM1 zoning that we're requesting. We did have a traffic study performed back last year. We've had it updated. It is included in your package. And the net of the traffic study is certainly this reduced population down to 45 townhomes will produce less traffic than if the property were to be occupied with uses allowed in the I-1 zoning district, which could include reoccupying the building as is, which could include tearing it down and putting in smaller businesses that are allowed in I-1 zoning. So the study offers a variety of scenarios, but in all of them, 45 townhomes produces less volume, as you would kind of visually expect. One important little feature, the previous owners or the current owners of the property had a, I'll call it a use agreement in place for many years now, which takes a sliver of the trail, and they needed to use that to be able to turn semi-trucks and what have you. And so there's a formal agreement in place, and we will, upon approval and going forward, we will be abandoning that agreement, returning the property back to the trail or whoever owns that property. We've met with the Trail Authority on a couple of occasions, and they're looking forward to getting their land back. And we'll take the fence down and fill in with landscape material. So our design criteria for the project and the goals. We wanted to develop a low-density townhome neighborhood, orient the units to take full advantage of the creek and the creek trail, utilize design cues consistent with some of the most attractive homes in the adjacent neighborhoods. In fact, as a side note, there were some neighbors that didn't love us in our previous visits. And so we figured, keep your friends closer and your friends close and your enemies closer. So we met with the neighbors, we shared our new vision, and we actually have been working with them to come up with some design cues for the architecture that's presented. You've seen some of it already. And they actually shared some vision boards and images from the neighborhood and from architecture that they'd like to see. And so that's what we've used on the architectural side. We're going to be using high-quality, low-maintenance materials, have a lush landscaping plan to enhance the property. By the way, this while these are 45 individually owned condominiums, it will be a site condo as well, in that there'll be a master association. And that master association will be responsible to maintain all the landscaping. So and there'll be an annual budget they pay into condo fees, dues. And so the concept of trees dying off and any blighty kind of condition to form is highly unlikely because of the condominium structure of the master association. So we're going to have a wonderful landscaping solution to enhance the area. We'll be restoring the creek bed area. Right now it's fenced off and kind of overgrown. We're going to restore that, at least on our side of the creek, to a vibrant, clean, natural condition. We're providing convenient guest parking to each unit. As Vidya offered the formula and a couple questions have come up, the main parking for all these units will be inside the condominium. And then each unit will have this pad in front that will accommodate 2 cars. So, and then for any overflow to people visiting their family or friends, that's where the 11 parking spaces will come into play. So we've got an abundance parking. The formula shows a need for 127 total. We've got 175. And the essential goal is to support the active lifestyle community with ties to the trails and parks. While this isn't a perfect walkable to downtown, it's certainly bikeable. And it's somewhat walkable if you want to take a little longer walk. But it's really the parks, the nature, and the architecture, the landscape, and the whole siting that we've developed. This is what we've had in mind to arrive at our plan. Now, Vidya mentioned the little graphic foobar on the 6-foot balconies that we're projecting into the side yard setback on the west side. And so due to timing constraints, our engineer had to just kind of stretch the units to pull those balconies out of the setback, and that's what's in your package. That's what was submitted. But we clarified that really what the plan is that western drive aisle actually would be shifting to the east 6 feet, and that would pull all 11 of those units that are along the west elevation. It would pull them to the 6 feet, which would pull them out of the setback. What that does, there's a little bit of a domino effect. So on the right-hand side is the actual current site plan. A couple of the units have gone from 26 foot, there's 2 units. They're either 26 feet wide or 20 feet wide. 20 feet wide are recognized as the 2-bedroom, 26 foot are the 3-bedroom. And so some of the units were changed from 26 to 20, some from 20 to 26. The net change is our mix was 8 20 units and 37 26-foot units. We've mixed that by 1. It's now 9 20-foot units and 36 26-foot units. And that's what will be in the next rev of the design going forward. But it's still 45 units. And as you can see visually, if you had to pick, it's like a Where's Waldo, if you had to pick the difference between the two, if I didn't tell you, it'd take you a while to figure it out. As far as landscaping, here's the landscape plan, here's the ornamental light. If it's determined that we want to add some more lights, we'd be more than happy to do that. That's part of, we want that vision, that sort of gas lantern, comfortable, nicely lit internal drive system. The other clarification is each unit's gonna have 2 coach lights and a main entry light at their front door. So as people have their lights on or on timers or what have you, there'll be a real nice subtle site lighting environment, I guess I'll call it, at all times. So here's our architectural design. Again, the hardy plank, hardy board, cementitious materials, the wood look garage doors. There'll be some wood timber look around the entrance doors with a nice stone base. One of the reasons for this architecture, again, from input from the neighbors and to support that, I guess, more casual lifestyle that we talked about in our criteria. We've done townhomes in the past with the brick and the limestone and the very formal look and had very successful with those. But we don't see that for the creek, the trail, the casual lifestyle that we're saying. So we believe we've developed what we think is a very smart looking use of gables and dormers and shed dormers and gable dormers and relief coming in and off the building, combination of metal roofing along with the asphalt roofing. We're actually very happy with the architecture, but we'd be welcome to get some input if you have any comments or thoughts regarding that. So here's a typical elevation that shows the calls out the different materials. It's in your packet. Here are the 20-foot plans and the 26-foot plans. Essentially, at the grade level is parking. And by the way, that garage depth of 20 feet, if a customer wants, if they got a Suburban or something, that interior partition is not a bearing wall, so we could shift that if someone wanted to make a deeper garage. But we don't see a need to do that for all of them. And there'll be a living area and a master bedroom suite on the middle level, and then on the upper level, the 2-bedroom unit has a single bedroom suite. The 26-foot unit has 2 bedrooms with a Jack and Jill bath. And these units can be customized within a certain extent. We're gonna offer elevators in some of them if someone would like that, and some other customized features. Here's a section showing the 30-foot to the mid-level of the gable roof. Very simple, house style of structure. Here are some rendered elevations, front and rear. And then here, we really have 2 on this balcony feature because of the need to pull the balconies out of the side yard setbacks. We've got some where, in this case, the balconies are on the rear, and the front just has the entrance door and the garage door. But for the units on the east side, facing DPW, actually, here we have that middle level is mirror imaged so that the living room area and the balcony face inward, and the back of the unit is just a patio area with no projections into the side yard setback. So same features, same general architecture, and then here's on the left, the woodward front entries would have a little covered sitting area and a covered porch as the main entry into the unit. And there's just a little image of kind of what the roof line as they jog back and forth. We want to create architectural relief, shadow lines, and detail so it's not just a, you know, a wall of materials. Vidya mentioned some of the comments. She went over all these, so I'm not going to replay them other than a real quick. Clarified the zoning. The internal roads are private. They're not roads. The 24-foot will add no parking signs and coordinate pavement with the engineering. Another comment on the street. Purpose sidewalks, clarified that with the private entrances facing Woodward. The comment 5 is the formula for parking, which we will clarify on the next submission. We actually were showing the need for more parking than what that formula shows. Also, she was looking for a clarification on the encroachment into the front yard, which is allowed by your ordinance, that diagrams out of your ordinance. And we clarified that, and we'll have on the next submission, that our front porches and our front entry covers will project 6 feet into the front yard setback. Fiber cement boards, we'll discuss with Planning Commission any thoughts or ideas on the materials for our elevations, any different than what we're presenting. And our civil engineer has clarified that the cleanup of the creek bed will not require any special eagle or other permitting. We're not doing anything in the creek bed other than clearing dead debris and putting a little bit of allowable planting in that area. And we'll coordinate that with engineering and any other agency, but we're not anticipating any eagle permitting. We did just a couple days ago get some first round, if you will, of engineering comments from your city engineer. And we actually had a call with her earlier today to go through her comments. There will be some, as we move through the engineering, there will be some clarifications or adjustments made, but we don't, based on our review of the comments and our call today, we do not anticipate any significant scope or design changes from these comments. We don't think we're gonna, do anything remarkably different than what you're seeing tonight. And between now and the public hearing date, we'll address whatever comments more specifically in the revised site plan for the public hearing. So here we are, an exciting opportunity. We'll provide new stormwater, no more contamination to the creek. We're gonna upgrade all the environmental conditions to residential, upgrade a blighted site into a vibrant residential, bring additional in-demand active lifestyle luxury condominium living to Rochester. Will bring significant additional new revenue to the city in line with primary goals of the master plan's housing and zoning direction. Additional traffic is less than industrial uses, will provide upgraded appearance and value to the entire area. So there's a year and a half worth of evolution, and we're pleased to be here and look forward to dialogue, discussion.
There's probably going to be a couple questions for you from up here, so.
We're ready for that.
I don't want to catch you off guard. So commissioners, to that extent, are there any commissioners questions or comments that anyone would like to bring to the applicant's attention? Mr. Gasson?
Just a couple comments. I appreciate your presentation and the journey the project's taken. I think it's getting in the track, I think that could move forward, so I appreciate that. And your comments in response to the lighting, that you would look at it. And I'm sure from now until next time it comes back for the public hearing, that the video will weigh in on the need for ADA parking or barrier-free parking, and expect that'll kind of go the right route also. So thank you again for how the project's moved ahead into where it is right now.
Yes, thank you.
David, could maybe the question about the sidewalks, I think that was relevant. what their thought process was on not having it.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that back up. What do you guys think about it? That development is going to be full of people that want to get out of the development into the
Yeah.
city, and they're going to want to do it by walking.
You know, there's a discussion, there's a style. I can point to a variety of communities from my experiences. Some have sidewalks everywhere, and some don't. There's some very affluent communities, you know, with a very, actually a good friend of mine's got a very nice house in West Bloomfield, a $3 million house next to 20 other $3 million houses, on a gravel road, which is a city road, no sidewalk. So, we do have a sidewalk network that feeds kind of that internal cluster of units, and that does come out to the street. So for that population and people surrounding that, they could access that sidewalk to get to the road. So that's probably half our population. For the volume of, again, traffic and the volume of people moving about the site at any one time, yes, there will be people that will walk down their private aisle to get to the road or get to the sidewalk that connects to the road, that connects to the trail and the parks and everything else. If we could add sidewalks internally, we'd consider that, but there just isn't room, because we'd have to bump out. Right now, we're really kind of shoehorned into the layout we have. We think the driveways for the guest parking in front of each unit are more valuable than rarely used sidewalks. So we're comfortable with our design, and we believe it's fine, and we don't see a convenient way to modify it. But we're not uncomfortable with it.
Well, just as a follow-up, I would be more favorable to have it. I'm thinking about how trash was described. I think you're gonna roll it out to the street, someone's gonna pick it up. Basically, you're gonna put in your can in your driveway, which is gonna be a difficulty getting in and out on trash day for the resident. And if I'm looking at it, it's your decision, but you're connecting a drive that's maybe 6 feet away from the other one by a little patch of sidewalk, which I see that as a betterment, but I've never done one of these kind of things before,
Yeah.
so I've seen one in the city.
We view it as a balancing act. We like where we're at. Even the rendering shows, even though there's a little patch.
Yeah, that little patch.
We'd rather not, fill that in with any more concrete than we need to. And then, if we did, the usable depth of that parking, people would be walking on the backside of their neighbor's parking aisle. We can't just add 5 feet or whatever the width is to everything. We'd lose like 12 units or something. We'd lose the entire center of the site, and we aren't able to do. We aren't able to do that.
I'm not totally following that loss of space, but you're more into this than I am. I want to ask the manager if the one other development like this recently in town, I don't know, 10 years ago or so, Cumberland
was that,
Ridge,
do you
I think, was it called Cumberland
Yeah,
Ridge?
those private roads, though, that, we had that right away, 60 feet to get the sidewalks, that's the difference.
Are there sidewalks there? There are, okay. Very, very similar to this in terms of,
A little bit wider right away, they have a 60-foot right away, so they can tuck the sidewalks in there with.
I see Mr. Gasson's point. May I
Go ahead.
speak? Thank you. I see Mr. Gasson's point, but to your point, sir, there are very affluent subs closer than West Bloomfield that don't have sidewalks, and I suppose it's a preference. So, but I'd like to comment just to say I missed a lot of the history, which was significant, as I've been told and have learned about. But, from what you described, taking feedback from the neighboring community, it reminds me a lot of the residential in that area. So I think you've done a nice job incorporating, that aesthetic that fits that neighborhood quite well. Couple questions. these 4 homes on Woodward, they seem to be sort of shielding the rest of the property. And it doesn't, I don't get the sense that we're going to be able to see much of that property unless we pull into the private drive. Is that
That's, yeah,
accurate?
that's correct.
Unless there were no fence along the east side of the property, then we could see all of those homes, I think, through the DPW site, right?
Well, so there's, let me, I guess, clarify the vision of that whole east property line. Most of the buildings that are directly to the east are almost within 2-3 feet of the property line. The DP, there's a DPW building or 2, and there's some existing commercial structures that have been there for decades. There's no, I mean, there's a driveway that goes back to the DPW, but the public rarely, I think, if ever, would have a reason to go back there. And so there's really no view opportunity if you're driving Woodward, or if you, you're not gonna be looking into our property from the east at all. And so really, it was more to dress up. Right now, there's a chain link fence there. And so what we're offering is a 6-foot vinyl, architectural decorative fence. And yeah, well, it's 300 feet, and we're gonna soften it with the landscape material. And we'd be happy to have just landscape material, although I think our residents would also prefer the privacy and security of a fence. But the vision of that whole east row is that on the east side of the fence, there's no one that will benefit or not benefit from whatever we do, landscape-wise or fence-wise. And so what we're providing is really significant, and any concerns, again, for longevity of plant material will be managed by the Master Association.
Okay, I appreciate that response, and if I understand it correctly, walking down Woodward to the west or driving, we're not really gonna see this fence.
Not, I mean, you'll notice it from the property line, which comes 40 feet from the road. You'll notice it as you look back.
Okay.
But yeah, no, you're not going to, it's not gonna be a feature for people driving along Woodward.
Okay. And I wanted to, if you don't mind, just ask about the fire pit.
Oh, okay.
Given that it's gonna be a condo association, I don't know if you've set any, or it's probably very premature to have any idea of what the sections of the covenants and restrictions might say, but I assume there would be, an evening curfew or a nuisance noise parameter. So it seems to me just maybe a bit odd that there would be this fire feature, given those are predominantly used late in the night, and I don't know what kind of demographic you're looking to get into, for sales. They could get rowdy.
Well, we're seeing young professionals and sort of empty nesters, and yes, the Master Association will have in place hours of operation. It's mainly meant for a communal gathering spot. How many people are gonna party till midnight with the fire roaring? I think that would be rare. I think it's more benches and people walking their dogs and meeting their neighbors, and with the occasional fall fire.
Have you considered any other amenities there as an alternative?
Not at this point in time. Too small for bocce ball. Pickleball, no. Yeah, no, we think that's appropriate. We're managing another property where we have 2 fire pits, and it's a luxury setting, and they're well used. The only other thing might be barbecue, but for these units, these condominiums will be designed such that each person can have a private barbecue, as opposed to some of our multifamily units where it's restricted, and so we had to develop barbecue areas. But we didn't see the need to do that on this site. So just the fire pit is, and we could just have benches, and where people would go and gather if that were desired.
Thank you. Mr. Bachman, any further questions? Mr. Kenzik?
I'm sorry, I do have a question about the change in the private drive. I believe I saw a diagram with Chief Cieslik's approval. Maybe there was an approval, I'm not sure what the status is of that yet, but if there was an approval for accessibility of fire engines, does that impact?
No.
Did this change impact that?
No, the turning radiuses and all of that remain compliant.
Okay.
We verified that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I would just quick, the three-bedroom, how big a square foot are those? And the two-bedroom as well?
You know what,
Approximately.
we've changed that about 8 times.
Approximately.
I want to say we're in the 1,100 square feet for a 2-bedroom and 1,500 square feet for a 3-bedroom, not including the garage.
Mr. Lord, any questions for you?
Well, first, I'm glad that you're talking to the neighbors and took the initiative to do that, because, you know, there's a lot of comment, obviously, and as you'll recall, so, getting in front of that, I think, is a good move. And I guess just one quick question, the entrance location and its
Yes.
proximity to the trail crossing,
Yes,
was there any consideration to flipping that to the other side of the property line?
that's where we started.
Did it just not work, or what,
A lot of features went into moving the drive where it currently is, yes.
what was the hang-up with the other way?
How, the engagement of the front units to the street. One thing that's kind of odd about our property is that the southern property line does not mirror the curve of Woodward. It's straight east-west. So as a result, we kind of get pinched in that southwest corner of having extra land to make the curve. And so if we had the road over, and then there's extra turning radius issues, this was the superior location on about 5 different reasons that the engineer kind of came up with. And we did get a confirmation from our traffic consultant, Giffords Webster, in a memo form that due to the, low traffic volumes, when they did their original traffic study, there was no design yet. Or actually, the design we were contemplating was for the one big building. So they've updated their recommendation, and this drive location is of no concern. It is fine with them. They think that this location is a fine location.
Yeah, not to say that it wouldn't work, but it just seems to me like the other way would be better if it were to work. And I guess the question for Nick, that right-of-way is goofy right there. There's no question about it. And so that's gonna remain, there's no further right-of-way dedication that's required in setting a new right-of-way?
Yeah, and the building to the east, the Eagles building sticks out pretty far, so the farther you move that driveway towards the Eagles, you don't get clear view coming out, because the building's literally at the property line, just about. It's really tight there. It seems counterproductive. It seems like you'd want it on this side coming around the bend, but there's a lot better clear view coming on both sides. So our traffic engineers look at this also.
Yeah?
We're okay.
That's all I have for now.
Jessica, any questions?
Yeah, I have a comment on the zoning piece. If you look at the master plan, or the future land use map in the master plan, it feels like we have a lot of space designated for multiple family residential. We don't have as much space designated as RT. So with this, you would be taking away from that limited stock that we already have. And so my only concern is kind of the diversification of housing units that we're.
Yeah, so I can tell you, in RT shouldn't exist anywhere other than on Third Street and 4th Street, some of the Helens. They were made for duplexes, so was never contemplated to be a whole complex. That's why, if you look at the setbacks, it's 5 feet on one side and 15. That's on the whole project. Normally, you would have a 30-foot buffer like RM is, so RT was never anticipated. I don't know, that's why it wasn't zoned to RT. The master plan probably didn't dig in deep enough into what RT really means. It wasn't made for a giant site, that's RM. multiple families. So RT was, if you look around town, you'll see them. Helen, Alice, we have little duplexes, Third Street, there's a few duplexes, but it's kind of a very odd zoning classification. Certainly was never anticipated to be a big giant project. You would want RM with big setbacks on it, not, if you look at R1, 2, 3, it's 5 and 15 on the side yards, that's what RT is. It just allowed for these duplexes that were there back from 100 years, some of them, to be honest with you. So.
One more question then about the zoning is if, so it's my understanding the RM1 is meant to remain for legacy builds and the RM2.
No,
allows more
RM1,
of
it's
the
just a
future
density thing.
standard.
RM1 allows only 2.5 stories and 30 feet. RM2, you get into taller buildings up to 8 stories. It's a formula on setback stuff, so it's just a different classification of density. And if you look at the chart on the right-hand side, it talks about how many square feet you need per unit of land. It just gets bigger and bigger as you go to RM2.
Okay. My other comment was on the driveway. I echo Commissioner Ward's comments about, I feel like it would be better farther away from the trail crossing if possible. Sounds like you've done a lot of work to take that into consideration. The other thing is, so with 2 or 3 bedrooms, I imagine you would attract some families with 3 bedrooms. So does this have bathtubs? And then the other thing you said was casual lifestyle. You mentioned biking a lot. Where do you envision bikes, kids' outdoor stuff going?
So we're not anticipating families. We're anticipating professional singles, couples, and empty nesters. That's what we think our market is. We'd be, welcoming of families, but we don't see that there'd be, this property would be attractive to a family. And, what was the other tail end of your
biking.
question? Yeah,
Where would
biking.
you
Well,
put your
with
bike?
garages, there's gonna be room in everyone's garage for hooks and put your bike on the wall or in the back, or if you have one car or a small car and a big car, you keep your bike in your garage. Again, we have a multifamily, in another, area, and we have a bike livery that, stores 40 bikes, but here, people are gonna wanna have their bikes on their property.
Given that you said the garage doesn't fit a Suburban, it might be tight quarters to put bikes in, so maybe consider bike racks somewhere on the property.
Okay, well, we could consider that or add it if it becomes a need somewhere, but also if I'm a condominium owner, I probably wouldn't wanna, walk 100 feet away to go get my bike and it's stored outdoors and all that other stuff. What we do is there's hooks, there's systems to store bikes in garages where you can share it with your car. And as I mentioned, if we do get an owner that says, hey, I got a Suburban and I want a bigger garage, that partition wall, there's nothing, it's not bearing. We could move it 2 feet, 4 feet, cut a notch into it, put a bike notch in it, any variety of simple modifications to expand the functionality of a garage. There's also a number of couples and or people that are using one car instead of 2, and or choose, hey, honey, I'll park on the pad out front, you take the inside. Now you got a whole half a garage for your lawnmower, well, there won't be a need for a lawnmower here. But for the bikes, the grill, the trash cans, everything and anything you want. So we're not gonna try to dictate how they use and manage that, but we're comfortable with what we're providing.
Okay. Mr. Gasson, you had another
Thank
question.
you, Mr. Chairman. How do you plan to develop this? You said there are 5 or 6 units per building. Are you gonna just start and do all the buildings at one time? Are you gonna do a building section, and when they're sold, you do another building section, et cetera, et cetera?
So, we are planning to develop to construct the project in phases, depending on sales and pre-sales. If we have strong pre-sales, we'll develop the whole community at once. We'll certainly develop the utilities, the access road, the lighting, the perimeter landscaping. And as far as the actual units of each building, we would do that in buildings. My guess is that economy of scale, we'd probably be doing at least 2 to 3 buildings at a time. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. There's 9 buildings, so we'd probably do 3 groups of 3 or something like that. We're actually anticipating positive sales. We've already gotten some inquiries. And so if we get, we get people that are really interested, we'll build them and sell them as quick as we can. But it won't be like 1 building at a time. I don't think that'll be the case.
Mr. Gass, thank you. One other, early on, I don't remember what version of it, you had a building team all kind of collected. Is
Yes.
that still the approach that you're going down with the local builder being part of this?
We, it's a different product, and so we haven't even thought about that yet. It's a different style of construction, and so we're gonna coordinate that with, our other team members.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome. Did you, any other
Chairman?
Yes.
I
Yes?
do have a caller with their hand raised on the line.
Okay, I've got just a couple questions, and then we'll certainly start to take a couple comments from the public. So I want to talk a little bit about the environmental cleanup that's going to happen at this site, okay? So
Okay.
this is a brownfield, is that right?
I don't know if it's actually classified that yet. We're in the middle of that process.
Okay, but you anticipate there's going to be environmental remediation at that
Yes.
site, correct? Okay. And because it would be a residential, it would be the unrestricted residential cleanup standard that you guys would use, is that generally correct?
We'll
Yes.
coordinate with the PM Environmental, and the right, authorities.
And what I'm trying to, is be the most restricted, meaning it was the most
Yes.
intense cleanup because of the residential use?
Yeah,
Okay, so
that's
it's
why
going
we
to be.
keep on emphasizing to residential standards.
That's what I want to
Yes.
make certain. Okay, and then either this might be a question for you or maybe even Mr. Banda for you as well. I want to be clear on the zoning and how it comports to what exists now and then the master plan and what we had discussed, okay? So when you were here before, I think it was last February of 2023, I think is when we had that big meeting. And there was a lot of conversations, a lot of discussions about let's follow the master plan. Let's, be consistent with what that says. And Mr. Bain, if I understand correctly, the master plan, although it's industrial, it intends or would presume a future use being of RT. Is that correct? Okay. And the RT is the duplex that we talked about that you said was on Third and Helen. Okay, and this would actually remove RT, make it RM1, which would be the 2.5 stories, et cetera, and comport with all the setbacks that are required, but you guys would actually go above and beyond that. Is that right?
Well, as Vidya reported in her report, and we did the same exercise, if you were to do a literal application of the RT zoning.
Right.
You could get 52 units.
Right.
If you do that same literal application of RM1 zoning requirements, you would yield 45 units.
Okay.
And so we are actually proposing a rezone that is less dense than what your master plan would allow, if it were to be zoned to RT.
Okay. All right. I get any further questions for the applicant? No. Mr. Banner, is it okay? Yep. Is it okay if we take a few questions from or comments from the public? Because I know the applicant has said that he had met with some people, so I think it would be a good exercise to entertain a couple people. So I guess, Rose, do we want to start with the person on the Zoom? Go right ahead.
Sure, can the caller ending in 179 unmute yourself?
Hello? Caller 179, please unmute yourself. Okay. Okay, is there anyone else? Okay, so why don't we, Rose, why don't we wait for that? We'll come back to the callers. Anyone from the public who would like to make a comment? Ma'am, please, come up to the lectern and just introduce yourself and.
Hello, can you hear me?
Oh, yeah, you know what? Let's go right ahead, sir.
Sorry, yeah, Michael Lopez, 342 Woodward. Thank you for taking my comment. Can you hear me okay?
Mr. Lopez, go right ahead. We can hear you very well.
Excellent, thank you. I do have a concern, as the presenter mentioned that, and one of the commissioners actually spoke to, congratulating the presenter on getting out in front of the residents. I am one of the closest single-family homeowners to that development at 342 Woodward. I'm in the corner of Woodward and North Oak. And no one has contacted me. And I also I belong to a Facebook group regarding this site. And I have not heard any comment from any of the members of that Facebook group of anyone being contacted. So I do have some concern and some questions about the number of residents and if they're in fact single-family homeowners that live on Woodward or Ludlow that have been contacted, and how many of those. Because as being one of the closest, I'm a little concerned that I wasn't consulted, and I did speak at the previous meetings, and my address is on record, and I wasn't contacted. So I just want to caution the commission, before you compliment the developer on getting out in front of this, with speaking to the residents, there are some very concerned residents who have spoken previously on this issue who have not, in fact, been consulted. So I want to say that. And in the interest of time, I won't say too much about other issues on this, because I'll reserve my comments if and when this gets to public comment. But I do want to just speak to a comment that was made about the fire pit and that very small green space area, a stark difference from the previous presenter with regards to green space and ecology and conservation. But perhaps the reason there's not enough room for bocce ball is it's overdeveloped, and if you eliminate a couple of units, you have room for bocce ball. But I'll reserve further comment to another meeting. Thank you for your time.
Mr. Lopez, thank you for calling in. Okay. Rose, are there any other callers on the line?
No, I don't see anyone else with their hand raised.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, to the members in the public here, go right ahead.
Okay, my name's Margaret Mountain. I live on 160 Albertson Street. And I'm just not, the thing I'm not clear about here, you know, you've talked a lot about the wall on the east side, is what's happening between the development and the Paint Creek Trail. Like, I can see the sliver that the cities, or the Paint Creek's getting back, and it doesn't look like there's a fence. I don't know if it's just trees or bushes, but my experience is people are lazy. And there's about, I don't know, 10 or 12 units that are gonna back on there. And I can picture putting trees and bushes up, and everyone is gonna have a trail through it, because people are gonna go from their backyard and take a shortcut to the Paint Creek Trail. So I don't know if there's a plan to kind of orchestrate, like, this is the path, like, you know, you can go on this street, but I just know, I mean, you see shortcuts all the time, because people just wanna get to the trail. So I don't know what the plan is, but I think if it hasn't been considered, I think there should be some thought to directing the foot traffic so that it doesn't, we don't end up with 15 shortcuts to the Paint Creek Trail. So I'd be interested in your thoughts on that.
Sure. Mr. Bannick, can he respond? How do you want, is that okay? Yep. To the applicant, go right ahead if you could respond to that specific question. Thank you.
So, in our dialogue with the Trail Association so far, we've discussed that topic. There's a fence there now, chain link fence, which covers that contract area. That'll get removed. We're gonna infill that with fairly dense landscaping, which would not be friendly to traverse. We've asked the Trail Association, could we put in, you know, a couple of little walkways into our property for our residents? And I think they would prefer we not do that. So our plan is to coordinate with them first, and then, you know, try to discourage what you described of people cutting through. And it still may happen, but we don't think it's gonna be a big blighty kind of issue. But we wanted what you described, we wanted, and we've been discouraged from doing that at least so far.
Thank you. Any other comment from the public, please? Sir, please, go right ahead. How are you doing?
Good, yourself?
I'm well. Just state your name and address for the record, please.
Sure. My name's Keith Chinoski. I am at 815 Ludlow Avenue.
Okay, go right ahead.
First, I wanted to echo Mr. Lopez's sentiments about being contacted. I actually own multiple properties on Ludlow, and I never even heard about it. I'm also part of the group as well. No one even talked about it, so I would be interested in attending any of those type of meetings in the future. Two, you had mentioned you're not looking at, or you don't think you will attract families. I was curious, do you have a price range in mind for what you're gonna sell the units for?
That's a little ways out, so.
Okay, you had mentioned that you had some interest and some potential pre-sale, so I was just, figured you must have had a range in mind.
We're not the pricing yet, but they aren't gonna be crazy expensive, and they aren't gonna be inexpensive. They're gonna be market priced.
Okay, and then from those market price units, are you gonna allow any larger companies to come in, buy a certain number of them, and then rent them out?
I don't think that, well, that's certainly not our plan. The Master Association will have rules on if owners can rent and in what time frame or whatever. We don't expect what you just described to be any kind of volume or population of the 45 units.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. To that point, Mr. Banda, just to refresh my recollection, the city of Rochester has a prohibition against short-term rentals or Airbnbs, correct?
Not a prohibition, but it's very hard to work around, so yeah,
Okay.
we do not encourage.
Okay, so where's that? And then second is, because I remember this conversation coming up last time, is there a way that, or would that be under a special project that the city, okay, so this was considered previously, when it was a special project, we could have made a condition that they could not have been bought and rented out, they had to be owner occupied. Because this is not gonna be a special project, the city's hands are kind of tied, and we can't necessarily do that. So I understand what you're saying, and it was certainly brought up previously, but I don't think we as a body can make that condition. Is that right, Mr. Bainer?
Correct.
Okay. So, but thank you for your concern, and it's certainly, but go ahead, Mr. Mayor.
So this is not going to come to city council because it's not a
That's
special
correct.
project?
That's correct. So this would, just for the public, this would not come, this would start and stop here. It would not go to city council. The only time it would go to city council is if the applicant was coming for a special project. Is that, did I say that incorrectly? I'm sorry.
So rezoning goes to city
Rezoning.
council.
All
But
right,
with
got
the
it.
rezoning, we're gonna bring the site plan, so they, as Mr. Zamborski said that, so you can, or I'm sorry, that Vidia said, you can see what you're getting for your rezoning, so.
Gotcha.
But there won't be final action on the site plan from the council. They would, if they didn't like this site plan, they would turn down the zoning.
City council would have a decision in the zoning, not the site plan.
Right. And to full disclosure, by it being master planned RT, if city council turned down the RM1, it's defensible.
Right.
Whether it's better for the site or not, it's irrelevant. So city council it's gonna be looked at RM1, what do you get there?
Okay.
And they can look at it that way.
All right, thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Okay, any other comments from the public? Yes, ma'am, please. How you doing?
Good, how are you?
I'm good.
My name's Rebecca Hepner, I'm at 133 Woodward Avenue.
Okay.
So with the zoning being RM1 and not RT, and with it not going to city council, I do recall previously in this session today that there are no architectural standards when it comes to RM1, with it not being a special project. Meaning, in my opinion, that they can present us with this beautiful architectural design, but do they have to then do as what they described?
Yes.
I mean, or
That's-
can they go outside those bounds?
No, if they present that, that's what has to be built.
And if I can help.
Yes, please.
Because that's a very good point. So in any regular site plan approval, the city doesn't have architectural standards. But when they come for a site plan, they're presenting that elevation that becomes part of the packet. So they can't vary from that.
I know, but I
No matter
believe-
what district you're in, RT, they could do whatever they want anyway. So-
Yes, but I believe that there are homes in the city of Rochester that are supposed to not be more than 30% of the land use,
there aren't
and there are plenty of them. So what is presented architecturally is not always what is being built.
So that's not a correct statement. So any plan that's been approved since I've been here certainly are all 30%. They might not look like it, but they are 30%. They are
There's no way
surveyed
that
and
house
proven.
on Seventh is
It's
30%.
that's 30,
I'm
that's 30.00.
I live 5 houses from it, I promise you it is.
It's 30.
It is,
doesn't
honest
look
to
like it,
goodness,
but I know,
yes.
nobody believes us. I swear to God, we have them go out with lasers and measure, because everybody doesn't believe it. It's 30%, trust me. That's all I can say.
Listen, I'm telling you, I know, yes, I see it every morning. It's there, yeah.
It's there, right?
Oh, I know it's there, yeah.
Okay, but I just want to make
You
sure
can
that
buy
it
it.
needs to be within the realm of what they're presenting, because that would be a very, very big concern of mine.
Okay. But thank you, and it's duly noted, so thank you very much, I appreciate that. Okay.
And just to clarify, I don't think materials are in the scope of a site plan, right? So we're presenting high-quality materials, hardy board, cementitious siding and all that. Sounds wonderful. But is that a requirement?
It's not a requirement, but if they voluntarily say, these are our drawings and these are our materials, that's what they get approved. Any variance from moving a window and changing a trim board would have to come back to the planning commission. They're very aware of that when they come in, so we tie them down to what they say they're gonna do. We're not telling them to use hardy board or fake stone or cultured stone, but if they volunteer that, your purview on the elevations that are attached to the site plan lock them into those exact materials.
So by way of example, they present that, and then they get out there and they say, oh, we want to put brick up there.
Or
There's gonna be
aluminum siding,
or
you
aluminum
can't do
siding,
that.
there's gonna be an issue, because we're gonna be like, no, you have to stop, come back, and explain to us why you deviated from that
And
plan.
more importantly, so when the plans, if they were approved, the elevations with all the details of the materials go to the building official. He sits down at a table and looks to make sure they're exactly the same as what the architect submitted. I'm not gonna say that in the past, architects said, well, I'll just change the siding, and it's up to the building official to make sure they match up with exactly what you all approved.
Any other comments
Mr.
from the?
Chairman?
Yes. Yes,
So just to reassure the planning commissioners and the members of the public, once a site plan has been approved, every aspect of the site plan must be followed. Whether the ordinance requires brick or not, if the applicant has shown brick on the building, if the brick is 16%, 16% brick must be on the constructed thing. There can be absolutely no deviation from a plan once it's approved by the planning commission. And that goes not just for building architecture, it goes for all other elements of the site too. Every single tree, shrub, light fixture that is shown, the applicant cannot unilaterally change anything without prior approval from the city.
and.
So if the site plan is approved, that is it. Every small aspect of it must be followed.
And I appreciate that because, and I want the public to understand too, is that when we sit up here, we know what we're approving and we regularly go and watch these projects be built. And I am constantly, letting Mr. Bannon know, hey, I don't think that guy's doing what he's supposed to do, or that's different than what was approved, and they will get in front of it. So I can represent to the public that what's presented, what's approved is adhered to. If not, it's addressed.
Vidya just generated a question. If, as Mr. Gaston said that, hey, we might need more streetlights, and that's not currently part of the plan, or even take that scenario and say we need less. Since it is a deviation, whether it's plus or minus, does that not mean that, quite frankly, this plan is not ready to be approved tonight, and they have to come back with a
Yeah,
final
we're not
plan?
asking for it to be approved tonight.
Yeah,
We're
we're
just
just
asking to
saying
set the
approve it.
public
It's just set
hearing.
for public
And then the
hearing.
comments they heard, I think Mr. Amborski said he took a lot of notes, come back and address those at the next meeting.
Okay.
And if they aren't addressed at that meeting, We wait till you get
Okay.
what you
Yeah,
need.
there'll be that
And
list
tonight's
at the
not
end
an
of the
approval of
letter.
any, we're gonna notice this to all the residents.
Right.
Everybody within 350 feet and everybody that was at any meeting prior will get notice from us, not from the developer, so.
Okay. Is there any, oh, Mr. Lord, go
Just
ahead.
real quick, procedurally, so we've got rezoning, we have site plan. Site plan stops here, rezoning moves on, right, to the council for approval. The rezoning application is gonna also bring along with it the site plan, so they have the ability to see it. Just curious, why didn't we do this as a conditional rezoning where it stays together?
Well, conditional rezoning means you're going out, we didn't want to open the door to allow things that would be varied from RM1. The strongest argument was just underlie the zoning properly and stick to that. A conditional rezone means that they're asking for something else, and it opens the door, quite frankly, on their side, for us to ask for things. But it's not necessary, because you want the underlying zoning to be, you only use conditional rezones when you have something you can't fit into your traditional rezoning, so.
Okay.
It would be nice to be able to force that, but it's a volunteer process when you go to conditional rezoning.
I'm not accustomed to seeing a rezoning application and then, oh, by the way, here's the site plan that goes with it, because normally it's just on merit of the zoning district.
But I think the applicant said they did it that way because they wanted to show exactly what the purpose of the rezoning was.
No, I get
There's
it.
no bait and switch or anything.
I
Did say that
understand.
correctly?
Yeah, well, you can love or not love our designs and our scope, but we've been fully transparent from minute one, and we're gonna maintain that character. So that's why we're happy to offer our proposed site plan, our architecture, our everything.
Any other questions or any other comments from the public? Okay. I just have one final thing, is there were some comments, I think Mr. Lopez and a couple of the gentlemen in the back there had indicated that they may have felt not involved in some of the process. So what I would like very much is if afterwards they could reach out to you and you could provide them with some information. I don't know if Mr. Reese or anyone else has spoken to you, but this is obviously a significant issue in the community. This is, very important to a lot of people, rightfully so. And I want to make certain that if representations are being made, that you've reached out to people. I want everyone to
meetings.
feel that they're included and have a seat at that table. So I'll leave it up to you and the community to have those discussions, okay? Okay, so that being said, Mr. Banda, I guess the question now, Mr. Mayor.
Well, are we giving our opinions now, or?
Well, yeah, I was just gonna say, is that, I think probably the next step is to say, okay, to the commissioners, I would open it up for us to have our internal dialogue, to let the applicant know what our thought process is on moving forward. So, Mr. Mayor, do you want to go first?
Sure, yeah, sure. Well, to my good friend Mike Lopez, they didn't call me either, so. And I think maybe I'll raise my hand and say, maybe the last time, nobody in the city got more phone calls than I did, so. And as people know, I thought, my first blush at the last project, that it was too big. I said that publicly, and so I was opposed to it. This one seems on, with a cursory view of what we've seen and heard, this looks a lot better to me, a lot more reasonable. So that's a good thing, and I would be willing for it to come to the public hearing and hear from people, and I assume I'll hear from people and talk to people and stuff. So that's a good thing. The issue with me is, I want to hear what the neighbors think. The zoning thing, again, I think we need a lot more, city council as well, to kind of understand the changes we're making, how it's perceived. We had the same issue last time.
Right.
And so, we got the same issue this time. So that's something that I think maybe city administration is gonna need to inform the council, inform planning if people, I think we need a quick, course in that, because, same as last time, it looks like we're changing something for a particular builder. I don't think we are, because we've talked about this, but that's something to talk about. I'd probably be against the fire pit as well. just because there's been a lot of issues that have come to council about a fire pit. You know, individual houses on the east side have it, I think that's fine. You know, I don't know about a public one in a smaller area. So that's something I would be looking at. So, again, I appreciate the effort to listen to us. I think this is a radical change from what it was before. I think it's a positive change, and I look forward to talking with all the stakeholders here and on council and in the neighborhoods to consider this process. But I would support it going to a public hearing.
Mr. Kenzik?
Yes, thank you.
Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
I agree. I like the plan that was presented. I think it's a more reasonable use of the land. Hopefully it's, more in line with what the immediate community would like. The one thing I would like to emphasize, and going back to the landscaping, is that, this is actually a subject that's kind of, I don't know if I want to say it's near and dear to my heart, but it's.
It is, it's okay.
It's more of a stake in, in my heart. But the thing is, I guess I question, why would you design something that's ultimately going to fail? In the end, yes, the condominium association will be responsible for maintaining it. But from day one, you're basically putting them between a brick and a hard place. You're putting up a fence, and then you're putting up probably too lush of a landscape, because now you're hiding that fence. I would like you to strongly reconsider maybe redoing that plan, and instead of putting all those evergreen trees, put a row of yews and break it up with some trees every now and then.
Yeah, thank you. Mr. Bachman, how about you?
Yes, thank you. Quick disclosure. I did have a pre-existing relationship with an involved party with Solaronics. I think it's all public information. Just kind of look out and see if it's okay if I mention your name to the public. Okay. Mr. Rick Resch Jr., I believe owns the property through Solaronics. So Mr. Rush, as of 2 years ago, was my direct next door neighbor, and he moved in 2022. So we had a relationship. We're friendly, exchanged some nominal gifts, when our daughter was born, for example. So I just want to make sure the public's aware of that. In no way will that influence, my decisions on the project, but I just wanted to get that out there. I agree with Mr. Kenzik and Mayor Bixson. I'd like to see this go forward to a public hearing as well, and I really agree with their sentiments. Just coming from an association, I suppose that's my help. Coming from an association, as Mr. Kenzik does, we see the problems that arise, and so I take your feedback on the landscaping and fence very seriously. It will become problematic without further thought. The fire pit, I just think is problematic if I understood your demographic. We've got young professionals, pre-kids, I think is kind of the intention, plus retirees. I think when you bring a fire pit into that scenario, bad things are bound to happen eventually. So I sort of share the mayor's sentiments there. And I see, my understanding of the history, which is limited, is the feedback I understood came from some significant events, public hearings. I don't know if it was part of this body or not. I think it was. And so I understand that what we saw tonight was a result of those meetings that were held in this forum. And from my point of view, I just see so much more value in that particular lot. I mean, industrial could be put in there tomorrow, right? And I don't know how the neighboring community would feel about new industrial there, considering higher traffic issues, as the traffic study showed. So this is a major enhancement. We get remediation, return of property to the trail. I mean, there's a lot of benefits to this, and I feel like the aesthetic, I'll go take a closer look, but I feel like the aesthetic of the buildings and the facades really fits, particularly that part of Woodward that's been redone in recent years considerably, on the other side of Mr. C's, sort of going to the east. Anyway, that's my preliminary feedback. I appreciate your consideration of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Mr. You're all set? Okay. Jessica?
I echo a lot of the comments that we heard from the mayor and the other commissioners. I do think that this is an improvement from the first couple submissions. I like that it's on the lower density side of the RM1 allowable size. With that said, though, it does still feel really crowded to me. Not a lot of green space, not a lot of room for storage. I understand your demographic is young professionals, but realistically, 3 bedrooms right next to the park, right next to the basketball courts, potentially other developments, community garden, you're gonna attract families, and I think it's really tight quarters. You don't have sidewalks, limited lighting. It just, it feels like there's a lot that could be done to make it a little bit more friendly for that kind of demographic. But with that said, I'm very interested in what the community has to say. I do think going to public hearing would be a great idea, so I'm supportive of that.
Mr. Lawyer?
Yeah, I think, I give you guys a lot of credit for hanging through this site and trying to flip it 10 different ways and try to figure it out. I can't help but keep staring at it going, boy, is there a way to just tweak a little thing here or there? But I know you guys have probably laid awake all night, for many nights trying to look at the little tweaks and things. Like for example, I know you took some of these units and the balconies that were on the back, you moved them to the front. And I want to make sure that you're happy with that decision, because it sounds like maybe that decision was made because the balcony wouldn't fit in the setback. And, so like in that scenario, I can't help but think to myself, well, geez, we're talking about a setback on the east side up against, I don't really care personally, this is just me personally, but I wouldn't care if you're in that setback and if you had a variance, but I realize that's down a different road. But again, I love the elevations. I really like the product there, and frankly, this site is so stuffed. The reason why you're not having sidewalks is you just can't fit them. You're literally gonna have building front to building front is gonna be easements for utilities and everything. You are stuffed in here, right? And so, to me, what's gonna make this site attractive is nothing but the architecture. Because it has nothing to do with walkability, it has nothing to do with that, you have no room for anything. The benefit to you is that the amenities are right across the street. It's the park, it's city living, that's what the cities do. Your play yard, your yard is the parks that are available to you, which I think is a major attractive part of this. So it has, for me personally, it has very little to do with those other things. It has a lot to do with the architecture. So I'm glad we're starting from a good place there, in my opinion. I really like what I'm seeing. And yeah, I'm supportive to move it forward to a public hearing. I will say, not to continue on the landscaping, but on the west side, I know there was a comment from the public about the ability to connect onto the trail and just kind of come walking through. It is very thin there right now on the landscape plan. It looks like it's just a handful of, deciduous trees along there, which is gonna be wide open in the wintertime, so you might just take a look at that.
Thank you. So I guess I would echo many of the comments made by my fellow commissioners, and having been involved in this project for quite some time, I've seen the modifications that were made based on the input from the public. It started as a 108-unit 4-story building, went down to 88 3 stories, and now we're at 45 and 2.5 stories. And I think it's something to be said to the developer for listening. Sometimes they come in and they don't like what they have to say or what we have to say, and they take their toys and go home. And in this instance, I think there's been a real sincere commitment and job by the developer to take into account what is a right fit for that property. I do want to make certain that, if this thing moves forward to public hearing, that the development group has further outreach with the community. I'm going to ask about that the next time, and say, I want to really make sure that the public has had an opportunity to talk to you about it and their voices are heard. But that being said, I agree. I think that you've done a fine job of listening to the people. You've done a fine job of finding a use for that site, which I look at every day as an abandoned site that frankly has a lot of potential. And I want to congratulate and tell you guys you did a good job. We're not there yet, we've got some work to do based on what was said, but it's certainly a step in the right direction. So I would certainly be in favor of taking the next step and moving this towards public hearing. So with that being said, is there a motion to set this development for a public hearing at the next planning commission, or the next available planning committee? It might not be next month, it might not be whatever, but that would be the process, so.
So moved.
Okay, support.
Support.
Support by Mr. Lord. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Hauser,
Yes.
Bixson,
Yes.
Bachman,
Yes.
Clauser,
Yes.
Gasson,
Yes.
Kenjuk,
Yes.
Lord.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Gentlemen, please reach out to the community, and to the community,
Yes.
reach out to the
We'll-
developer.
They gotta keep the meeting going. For those that wanna find us or help us find you, we'll be in the lobby for a few minutes.
And Mr. Lopez, you can reach out to me via email if you'd like, and I will make sure that you get the information to the developer, okay? Okay, thank you. Okay, moving on to line item 6D. This is the Oak Street design at 114 West Third Street, consideration of a facade change. And this is also a request to set a public hearing. Mr. City Manager Nick Banda?
We'll go right to,
Actually,
yep, video.
Ms. Vidya, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're
Members
welcome.
of the commission. The request before you is a proposal from Jenna Campbell, who's the Director of Design and founder of Oak Street Design, to operate an office use at an existing two-story building with numerous facade updates to be done to it. The site is located on the northwest corner of West 3rd Street and Main Street Alley, that is between Main Street and Walnut Avenue. The site is zoned CBD, which is the Central Business District. So this is the location of the site. It is an existing building. So this is the alley behind Main Street, and this is West 3rd Street up on your screen. So professional and administrative offices are uses permitted by right in the Central Business District. However, all facade renewals in the Central Business District are brought before the Planning Commission in order to make sure that they keep up with the true character of the CBD district that is required. There are specific architectural standards. I had a few comments on the proposal and also a few items that needed to be discussed before the Planning Commission. The proposed use is an architectural design studio. The site is zoned Central Business District. I believe somewhere on the site plan it's called General Business. This is not General Business, it's the CBD district. Now, parking requirements for office uses is one space per 300 square feet. Now, the site plan states that businesses in the Central Business District are exempt from parking standards. That is incorrect. They are not exempt from parking standards. When the site was researched as a part of the Parking Management District study, each building based upon its use at that point of time was grandfathered in for a certain number of spaces. Every subsequent change in the use, if it results in a greater intensity of use of the building and thereby requires more parking spaces, the applicant would either be required to provide that additional parking or pay in lieu of parking. That's what needs to be done. In this case, for the applicant, the parking requirement for the site based upon the floor area, 1 per 300, is 6 spaces. But we still don't have information on how many spaces the site is grandfathered in for. And that's the information that the applicant can contact City Manager Banda and try to get, because there is a table that actually sets forth exactly how many spaces that is. Now, if you look at the actual site, there are, for some reason, the site plan is colored in black. I will zoom in so it's slightly better visible to the Planning Commission. So there are 4 parking spaces located on the north side of the site. All of these are labeled as staff parking. None of these are barrier-free accessible spaces. When I had a conversation with the applicant, I had suggested that the space that is closest to the rear building door be changed into a barrier-free accessible or a handicap accessible space. Right now, there is really no space for somebody in a wheelchair to access this building. There is some on-street parking on West 3rd Street. A parking provided here, we cannot expect somebody in a wheelchair to actually take the wheelchair down the alley on Main Street to enter through the main entrance. There is a rear entrance door to the building. So we had suggested that this space be converted to barrier-free accessible so that the door appears to be at grade. The building will have barrier-free accessibility from the rear. This issue has not yet been addressed, so I'm hoping the applicant can clarify how barrier-free accessibility is going to be provided for the building. Now, the lighting plan shows a single rear-mounted fixture on the building wall on the north side. However, the elevations, so if you look at this, this is the lighting plan. It shows only a single rear-mounted fixture, but then if you look at the actual elevations the applicant has proposed, which I will scroll to those sheets. Sorry, just 1 second. It's the next sheet. If you look, whatever light fixtures are shown on the elevations must be shown on the photometric and vice versa. And so the photometric plan accurately needs to reflect all of it. And also typical manufacturer's cut sheet detail needs to be provided for each fixture. Now, the zoning ordinance has specific standards that the Planning Commission looks at every building that is in the downtown and how the facade is renewed so that it's still in keeping with the architecture. Now, the applicant has proposed some major facade changes to the facade that is facing West 3rd Street. So this would be the facade that is facing West 3rd Street. The exact opposite, this is the north side facade. So basically, no change is proposed to the north side. To the south side facade, there is significant amount of change proposed. There are going to be complete storefront window system installed. There is going to be wood trim. There is going to be the cornice is going to be restored. The applicant also notes that some of the historic trim on the building is to remain. Right now, based upon the paint on the building, this trim is really not visible. So the applicant needs to clarify whether it's going to be power washed or how is it going to be restored. Basically, that clarification needs to be provided. So at this time, this is basically a facade renewal. However, it's a key corner on the street that parallels Main Street. So the Planning Commission's review is required for this particular proposal. So at this time, our recommendation is that the Planning Commission review the project and set it for a public hearing at your next available meeting. The Planning Commission packet the applicant submitted includes all construction details, roof plan, ceiling plan. None of that is really required for this stage of the review, so the applicant can actually save on a lot of printing and paper. All that is required for the Planning Commission is all the facade details, the site plan, the landscaping details, lighting plan, and fixture details. All the extra actual construction documents are not necessary. I would be happy to answer any questions the Planning Commission might have. I will put up the elevation of the building, the rendering of the building on your screen so you can see what the applicant is proposing for the building to look like. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, any questions for Vidya? Mr. Kenzik.
Yes. Hi, Vidya. I took a look at the building, and I guess the first question I have is they're going to be placing the air conditioning unit on the roof, correct?
Yes, I believe that is true.
Is there is a mechanical room which is kind of a partial basement, and it seems to be rather large. Any reason that you know of why they're not putting it in the basement?
We don't have an answer to that, Mr. Kendrick. Maybe the applicant can answer that.
Okay. The reason I bring that up is because their neighbor that's immediately to the west of that building is actually a 3-story building. And I don't know if the 3rd story is occupied, but it sits higher than this existing building. And if they're going to put that air conditioning unit, they're going to be looking down on it. So, you know, if there's some reason they can't put it or they're not putting it in the basement, I guess my question is, by code, will they automatically have to put a screen around that unit if it's located on the roof?
Is the applicant here? Okay. Well, let me ask, any other further questions to Vidya? Okay, so why don't we have the applicant come up? Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Gass?
I was going to ask a question about a site plan. Is that?
Oh, go ahead, please.
Little survey that we saw a moment ago, the only site plan, because I didn't see one. And my question kind of goes from there to the building elevation rendering looks like there's a new thing added to the front, and I'm
Right.
wondering if that crosses the property line onto the, towards the street.
Vidya, thoughts?
I'm sorry, which detail are you referring to, Mr. Guest?
I don't see a formal site plan in the package. I saw the, call it the mortgage survey looking document, but
Yeah.
the rendering looks as though it's adding a projection to the building towards the street, and I'm wondering if that's crossing a property line that I do not see in the document.
I will check on that. In the meantime, this is the site plan that the applicant has submitted in response to my previous review letter that had just the mortgage survey. The applicant originally submitted just this. I found that to not be acceptable, and I asked for a site plan, so the applicant has submitted this at this time, so.
So the site plan would show property lines, and I'll say the normal thing we expect, and I don't see that. So, and maybe that would answer the question that there is no projection beyond the property line, but I don't know that right now.
I believe the property line dimensions are shown here, Mr. Gasson, but it's just so dark, it's a little difficult to read. If you see where my cursor is, that is the property line dimension. And so is this, it says recorded and measured. It's just unusually colored all in black and gray, so it's a little difficult to read.
Okay, well, I raised a question, and I'm not sure I have an answer, but if you're comfortable with it, that means a lot to me.
Let's do this. Why don't we have the applicant come up, and if you can clarify a couple things or tell us a little bit more.
Yeah, I
In
have
order for the-
a quick 4-slide presentation to throw up. It's PDF. I'm gonna do it less than 5 minutes. I'm a little sad that everyone left and didn't want to stay for our presentation. My name is John Campbell. I live on 1135 North Oak Street since 2015, so gosh, it's almost 9 years now. My wife is Jenna Campbell, owner and director of design at Oak Street Design. We bought 114 West 3rd Street. That presentation right there. Yep, thank you. We bought 114 West 3rd Street last year, and interestingly enough, you have a team of architectural designers to get to a design. It's not as fast as you want it to be. But this is the building we're talking about tonight. Again, my wife and I purchased this building last year. So just quickly, what is Oak Street Design? So our team, we have a team of 4 architectural designers located here in downtown Rochester. Jenna, who's our founder, worked at a custom residential builder here in town for a period of 7 years before she went off and started Oak Street Design, and then recruited me as her husband, and then the other 2, Ben and Eddie, on our team. And one of the things that's been great is we do projects, mainly residential projects, all across the state of Michigan, everywhere from Marquette to Grand Beach to Harbor Springs. But the really cool thing is we do a lot here in town. We counted up the other day, Jen's been a part of over 50 different designs. That's everything from new build homes to adding a front porch onto someone's home here in town. History of the site, this was the Rochester era newspaper. It was the first newspaper. It was established in 1873. The building was built in 1883, which is very exciting, and has kind of been altered in many different ways, but in some ways it's stayed the same for a long time. Or 1885, excuse me. It has been used in the past as a chiropractor office. It's been used as a photography studio. I get a lot of that when I tell people what building we own. They're like, oh, I got my photo taken there with my family. So a lot of different things like that. In the essence of time, I'm going to turn it over to my architectural colleague here, Cody Newman of Driven Design. This is the existing conditions, just to describe what we see here. To answer a lot of the questions, and another just detailed portion of the rendering. So, Cody.
Thank you very much. Good evening. My name is Cody Newman. I, as mentioned, am the owner of Driven Design. We are located at 117 West Michigan Avenue in Battle Creek, Michigan. I was brought on. I am a 36 CFR Part 61 architectural historian. We do projects all over the country for preservation and renovation of existing buildings. So we were brought on to just help oversee the project and move construction documents forward for this project. As noted, this the site plan shown on C100, we do have those dimensions shown on there. As noted, it was just dark behind that. There's about 2 feet from the front of the building to the property line on the south side. So we are not protruding over that or even to that property line. There is a little bit of a buffer there. We had provided responses back last Friday to the review comments. So I just want to, and an updated set of plans with that. Just wanted to address a couple of those right off the bat. We did revise the CBD Central Business District, not General Business District, on the title sheet. We had noted that the spaces were the 4 spaces that are existing were grandfathered in. We understand that 6 would be required per the ordinance, but the lot is maxed out as it stands for parking on the site. It was noted that the idea was to stripe a space for ADA in the back compliancy to the back, to the entrance. Unfortunately, there's a step into the building at the rear, so that kind of mediates the ADA entrance back there. There's no room for a ramp back there, just given the property. So we were proposing that we would kind of take this corner out and ramp an entrance up in there. So we were proposing that anyone ADA would park on this street parking to walk over to that. We did not feel comfortable having people walk down the alley if they were to park in back, just because again, it is so tight, it wouldn't be a real safe corridor to walk down. We've updated the photometric plan and lighting plan. The rear of the building showed that light, the new light that's being added to illuminate the parking lot. There's currently none on the rear side, the north side of the building that is. And then on the side of the building, those 2 gooseneck lights, as shown in that prior photo. I don't know if we can scroll to that. Either way, those are existing. So we were just replacing those with a similar fixture. So we were not actually adding any light fixtures there. We were just replacing what was there. The redesign of the facade was done, basically pulling from historical elements in the community to try to increase the natural light and provide, again, an ADA entrance into the building that does not currently exist. And then we pulled elements from the cornice up above to provide the new storefront detail. With that, we are happy to answer any questions that you have on this project. It is not a change of use on the inside. It was an office before to an office now. So inside, there's a handful of things that are changing, but for the most part, it's sticking true to the use and the context of the neighborhood.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, any questions for the applicant?
I guess if I may, I'll just
Please.
repeat the ones I had regarding the air conditioning unit going on the roof instead of in the basement. Is there any space restrictions or reasons why not?
Air conditioners produce quite a bit of heat. That was the concern and noise with the basement. Typically do not like to put those on an indoor setting. That's why most all air conditioners are found outside. And again, given the proximity of just the site and how tight it is, the roof seemed to be the easiest place to locate that.
And will there be a screen?
It would have to be screened, right?
Okay.
Yep, and this would be, just for the record, an air conditioning unit, a condenser, not a rooftop unit. So this is not like a 10 feet tall, large unit. This is a 2.5 by 2.5 foot by 2.5 foot air conditioner unit, like a 3-ton.
Okay. Any other questions from any of the commissioners? Mr. Lord, please.
Just clarifier here, is that rendering the kind of natural brick color what is being proposed? Because what's in our packet is a white.
I can speak to that real quick. So, one of the great things about old buildings is they've been painted 1,000 times. And so the goal is to glass blast it, not sandblast it. It's a new technology, but glass blast it to remove the old paint. See if the brick is in good enough condition to maintain that natural color. That's the stated objective. If it can't be done, then we're gonna have to paint it.
Any other questions from the commissioners? Mr. Bannon, any comments?
No, we would just like to have a public hearing set.
Okay, so Mr. Mayor?
I'll make a motion, we have moved to a public hearing.
Okay, support?
Support.
Mr. Gasson, support. Discussion? Mr. Peckins, roll call, please.
Hauser,
Yes.
Vixen,
Yes.
Bachman.
Yes.
Clauser,
Yes.
Gasson.
Yes.
Kenjuk,
Yes.
Lloyd.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you very much for staying. Okay, number 7, miscellaneous, Mr. Banda.
Yeah, so, seems like every day something new comes in, so I think things on the horizon that you're going to see, in the next couple of months. Pfizer's looking at a $250 million addition to their facility. So they are the only, company in the United States that makes penicillin and bilicillin, which is penicillin for kids. They've been challenged by the federal government to ramp up that production. So it's a second-story add-on to the building, a bigger parking lot. Right now, the zoning board of appeals gave them a temporary trailer. So they brought in, I think, 50 more scientists to work in the building, work off-site, adjacent to the site. There was a building back in the past that was demoed in the existing parking lot to the east. So you'll see that plan soon. They've been working weekends. They've already met with the residents across the street that would have their backyards right to the building, just to make sure what would they like to see, if anything. So, pretty not obtrusive building. So we're looking at that. Talked to Rito from Silver Spoon. He purchased the Moon River Soap Company property, and they're drawing plans for the 3-story mixed-use building, either office or residential on the first 2 floor, office or retail on the first floor, and then residential above it. So we'll probably see that plan. You saw the 120 South Main initial presentation there. Listen to comments going back. We anticipate those plans back pretty soon. They haven't given us a time frame. They said they're still interested in the project, so hopefully we'll see that soon. And oh, yeah, that's true. Yeah, so the Roxy, nothing on schedule yet, but the owner of the Roxy bought the building next door, the School of Rock. So he's looking at doing something on the first floor, maybe a commissary that supports the Roxy, and then an apartment on the upper floor. That would take a special exception from the planning commission for upper story apartments. So we gave them all the requirements, what to draw. It's more than just a renovation change, so they'll come in for that project. I think that's it. So we'll keep you busy. And then in the meantime, Jeremy and I are going out to Northville on Friday, spend a couple hours with McKenna, with John Jackson and Vidya and their team, to how do we get this master plan districts across the finish line. Jeremy's done some good work where we know everything that's been through planning commission, some went to council, doesn't matter. The city clerk let us know, nothing was advertised after that, because at that time, the council couldn't agree on the process to go through. So we'll educate you guys and the city council as to next steps to get that thing across the finish line. So we can get the new districts done, a zoning ordinance amended, and then we'll have a clear path.
Okay. Okay. Commissioners, Mr. Kinsey?
Any updates on Brown Iron?
I'm gonna say no.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't think you're gonna see brown iron there. The circumstances changed a lot there, so probably not. Something coming soon.
Okay. 1 second, yeah. Any other comments? Okay, public oh, go ahead, Mr. Gasson.
Yeah, comment. The downtown inn, I know we had like some zigs and zags in getting that on some certain track, and I don't know if it's done right now, but.
Almost, the two black things in the front need awning covers, and that's it.
It has a really nice appearance, and I think it's turning out well.
You did a good job.
I would agree. We talked to Peter about that, and that gave him confidence, because we've got many of them, and clientele's changed. He's really happy with the direction it's going, the clientele that he's getting in. And yeah, he did good there. Took a while, but he did good.
Okay. All right, anything else? And I guess what we'll go to is public comment now. Sir, save the best for last.
You guys are the best, and that's what the public comment's about.
That's right.
I'm serious.
Name for the record, please.
Scott Beaton, 655 Bollinger Street, and I live about a half a mile from the preserves, right up Bollinger Hill. My wife and I, we walk your town every day in the summertime. It's a beautiful city. As habit, the wife goes to the gym, and she's pretty hot. I attend planning commission meetings, and you guys, when I told you, Nick, that you're the best, and I put it all in cap letters, and Stuart, you are. I mean, you listen to the residents, you see developments come before you that you feel are out of scale for your community. You negotiate with developers, and Nick and your staff and your board, boom. I mean, you really try to please the people who live here in Rochester. And I just want to come to the microphone at this late night and thank you. I did give him a nickname. He's the Petraeus of Rochester.
You know, next time, there's public comment at the very beginning of the meeting when everyone's here, okay?
No.
So don't be afraid to talk
And
then.
I've served on councils, I've served on planning commissions, and I've served on ZBAs. And I know it can be a thankless job, and I think you guys, all of you, do a great job, and I appreciate your time.
that.
I really do.
Mr. Beaton, thank you very much. Appreciate
you.
your comments. Mr. Mayor, you
Yeah,
had a
just
comment?
one last comment. I hope Dan and Jessica come back, because it's not usually this long.
Yeah, right?
It's not usually this long of a meeting.
I'm usually
Yeah.
in bed by now.
It's paybacks for those 35-minute meetings.
Funny enough, but I like to thank Jeremy, he got all these pictures, he found them,
Oh,
put
good.
them all at the sign
Those look
shop.
nice.
Came in and mounted them professionally, so just try to liven the room up a little bit, look at all the rows and the staff upstairs, just, it's a lot cleaner and a little more professional.
I just sent a note to
Nice job.
Holly about that. It looks great. It really does. You
Does.
guys have put a lot of work into this, and it doesn't go unnoticed. So Jeremy, thank you very much. So, oh, I know, it's paid by returnables.
What are you talking
Okay,
about, budget?
so that being said, any further comment? None being heard, meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.
Yeah.